Okay, that's it. Can everyone hear me now? Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me? Please react if you can hear me.
Good morning, can I hear you?
Awesome. Fantastic. All right. We are starting off now. We are kicking off now. Thank you all for joining us today for this session. We are about to have a really impactful session today. Just like you all already know, today's session is going to be the phase one of the HTCA grant writing series, where our goal is really to strengthen the health innovation pipeline through blended finance and grant readiness. We identified a major gap between health innovators and accessing grant and available finances for them. And so today's session is really going to bring us a lot closer to how we can begin to access the money that is on the table for different health innovators, whether you're in early stage, mid stage, or in growth stage. We have our speakers here on the call. We have Bertrand on the call. We also have Roland on the call, and we also have in person with us today Dr. Ibukun Tunde-Oni, who is also a member of the HTCA. So we do expect to have, so I just want you to expect to have a very highly impactful session. I would like you to engage as much as possible. So next slide, please. We're just going to do a quick run through of what the expectations for today is in terms of our agenda. But before we do that, I will introduce myself. My name is Ngozi, and I lead the community engagement and the design for health practice. I would also double as the moderator for today's event. I also have here present Adako, who is also our intern. She's also going to at some point come in to moderate for some parts of today's session. And so for today's agenda, we're going to do a quick intro about design for health. We're going to learn about us briefly and about the HTCA community just briefly. After which we'll be setting the context for today's conversation, and then we'll dive right into the meat of the conversation, which is the blended finance for health innovation. This will be taken by Ronald. Please, next slide. Then we would have the infused session where we would have Bertrand talk to us about how startups can begin to access global opportunities. Ronald's session is going to center around how you can begin to rethink how you access fundings and the different funnels to fund your startup. After that, we are going to take some Q&A from different participants on the call. Then we'll take our photo sessions, and then we'll invite Dr. Ibukun to take the grant writing training, where he would be giving us some of his personal practical tips that have helped him raise the money that he has raised. And then we'll also take another round of Q&As, and of course, we'll talk about the key takeaways, where we'll talk about what to expect for the phase two for those who will be interested in participating in the grant writing sprint. And would also, of course, talk about the next step for members who are interested in joining the HTCA community. Then we'll do our closing. And so next slide, please. To properly kick us off, I will just take a little bit of a housekeeping just so that the session is very coordinated well, and the session has we're all managing each other's time and being respectful of each other's presence here today. Kindly rename yourself, your Zoom profile to include your full name and perhaps your organization as well. We ask that if you are not speaking, if you're not one of the speakers, or you're not asking a question, or currently have a need to speak, we do ask that you remain muted. The Q&A session and the chat box is really available for you to drop your questions, drop your complaints or your comments. And I can assure you that we are also going to be looking at that chat box to ensure that your questions are asked as time permits. We also ask that you engage respectfully, use the Zoom reactions. It does help the participants, and it does help the speaker to know that they are being heard, and you can understand what they're saying. Participants, please do engage. I can see. Thank you for that. We ask you to engage, actively use the chat box. Lastly, please note that the session is being recorded, and we may also be streaming live on LinkedIn. So we ask that you just bear that in mind, and also note that this session would also be used for communications, post-event highlights. And so kindly note that it is recorded, and we do ask for your consent for that. Next slide, please. I know that some of us here on the call, it might be your first time interacting with us, and you're probably wondering what is the HTCA. You thought the event was interesting, but you would like to learn more about who we are. We are really co-creation hub. We're Africa's leading Pan-African creative and innovation ecosystem enabler, where we really accelerate, the adoption. We accelerate the application of health, of social capital and technology, for Africa's economic prosperity. We are present in, four African countries: Nigeria, Rwanda, and Namibia, Kenya. But our work really spans across 40 African countries. Our work really we have three core focus areas at Co-Creation Hub. We have the creative economy, we have education, and we have health. Co-Creation Hub uses these three thematic areas to really drive the work that we do across the different countries and really across the continent at large. However, we do also have our we'll say agnostic units that supports the work that we do. We have the startup support team. We have the higher education innovation practice. We have the design lab that is domiciled in our Rwanda office, where we carry out all our engineering work, AI-enabled work. Beyond just our practices that we have, which I will talk more about the health aspect a little more, we do have a very large community of over 50,000 innovators and entrepreneurs. CC Hub has actually invested directly into startups with worth over $10 million. And some of these startups have also moved on to attract external funding of over $150 million. And so this really is proof that we are really interested and invested in the growth of startups within the African continent, and we actually put our money, where our heart is, which is with startups. Like I mentioned, CC Hub has a focus on health, and through the channel through which CC Hub drives its health initiative is through the Design for Health. Next slide, please. It's through the Design for Health practice. And so the Design for Health practice, which is really where all of us are really a part of, is they're really focused on building a thriving health innovation ecosystem. And CC Hub really drives this through, collaborating, supporting startups and collaborating with governments, really to co-create and scale human-centered health solutions that improve the quality of care and expand access using technology as a catalyst. We are really interested in how we can support startups that are within African context, ensure that their solutions are really contextually appropriate, ensuring that they are really getting the right ecosystem that would allow them to thrive in the work that we do. And so because of this current need to really support startups in the way that matters for startups, we designed the Health Tech Connect Africa community, which I will talk about a little bit more. For us, at the Design for Health practice, we do have our focus areas through which we catalyze change within the health innovation ecosystem. Next slide, please. We have our two focus areas, which is the next slide, which is access to health and quality of health. And through that access to health and quality of health, our goal is really to improve the patient outcome. Next slide, to improve patient outcome. And so to help us really achieve our goal of improving patient health outcome of every African, we have a community where we host the digital health innovators. Next slide, please. We have our community, which we call the Health Tech Connect Africa community, which is really the reason why we are here today. That is really what informed the events that we have today. Our Health Tech Connect Africa community is really our interactive forum that is designed really to create a valuable support system for entrepreneurs and innovators who are working really to bridge the gap between the healthcare gap here in Africa across the continent. We do a lot of work with startups through this community. It's really a great community of over 200 innovators just like you. One of the things that we do in this community is we organize capacity building events similar to what we are having today, where we take you through investment readiness, we take you through business development, IP, what you need to know to register your event, your business, and also as well as grant writing like we have today. But beyond capacity building, we also facilitate partnerships, introductions between health innovators and industry stakeholders, government stakeholders, and the NGOs that would help facilitate funding and as well as access to resources that may be beneficial to you. And additionally, we support and we facilitate peer-to-peer learning between different startups by bringing them together to interact and see areas of synergy and how they can begin to collaborate amongst each other, which is one of the things that we are going to be doing in the phase 2 of this event. Another thing that we have done is really to provide other supports through providing distribution channels to startups. One of the key ways we've done that last year was we had a startup who had needed access to distribution for their products, and we were able to provide them with partnerships with different hospitals to help distribute their services, and they've been able to go on to raise over like $30,000 through that support that we've provided. And so these are some of the ways that we have done. These are some of the ways we animate the HTCA community. We also provide resources, access to different funding opportunities, and thought leadership, because we do realize that it's important that you build your capacity as a startup founder. And so next slide, please. And so for today, we're going to be having this event here today. There will be opportunity for everyone who is not yet on the HTCA to join the HTCA community. I really just did a very short overview of who we are because we are pressed for time. But for us, for the next phase of today's conversation, I would humbly be inviting Stephanie to really just take us through a quick context, just set the context for why we are here today. But before we invite Stephanie, I would like to read her bio. Please, next slide. Stephanie is my leader, in case everybody does not know. Stephanie is the head of the Design for Health practice. Really, she's a leading voice in digital health innovation in Africa. At this point, really, I want us to start clapping because Stephanie is really, she's the boss. She's had over 12 years experience, designing and scaling public health technologies. She leads the Design for Health practice at Co-Creation Hub, and she supports health startups. She also convenes the African Digital Epidemiology Innovation Network, popularly called the AD Network, that has over 600 innovators and researchers. But beyond all of this, she holds a master's in public health from the University of Manchester and also a certificate in disruptive strategy from the Harvard Business School. And so with a round of applause and Jesus joy in our hearts, let us make welcome Stephanie Aquarius for this context setting segment.
Okay, we don't have a mic. We don't need a mic. All right. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Okay, let me come forward so that you all can see me. Stand somewhere here so you can all see them as well. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Okay. So I'll talk about. I would stand here. Does it work?
No.
Okay, so you don't mind, right? Do you want to compensate? Please compensate. Our events are mostly virtual, and so I'm really glad to have some of you here today because we want to make sure that there's more room for interaction going forward. Once again, my name is Stephanie Okpere. I lead the Design for Health practice here at Co-Creation Hub, and we sit at the intersection of health systems in Africa, technology and tech innovators, and really, or I'll say our work intersects between the health system, technology, and human-centered design. And for us, what's critical is that the solutions that are being developed out of Africa are actually effective for solving health-related challenges in Africa. But what do we find? In interacting with startups, a lot of the time, and tech businesses, one of the key questions that everyone has to ask almost every time is how do we get funding? Stephanie, do you have funding for us? Are you willing to invest in us? How can you connect us with others in the space who can invest in us? I'll talk about an exercise that we conducted recently, briefly, before I wrap up today. But in setting the context, let's look at funding investments in Africa and where startups in Africa actually sit. To what extent are we able to access funding? In 2025, the data shows that about 32 billion USD investment came into Africa. It's not a good amount for startups and tech businesses. That's some good money, yeah. But when we look at the numbers in comparison with the global innovation ecosystem, you would find that over 400 billion was available globally. Now, if you look at that as well, US accounted for over 100 billion of that money for good reasons. Yeah, I'm sure that's understandable. But when we think about the population, in Africa, we have over 1.4 billion people, the highest number of people. And for us in Africa, innovation and technology is not just a nice to have. It's the reason why certain people are able to gain access to healthcare, while agricultural produce can reach people that it would previously not have reached, right? Technology is really a critical solution. And so these startup innovations for us are solutions to key problems that occur within Africa. Again, while the numbers look great, when you look closely at those numbers and you ask yourself, where's the funding going to? You will find out that the big four are responsible. 82% of that fund is either in Nigeria, or it's in Kenya, or it's in Egypt, and possibly even in Rwanda, which means that if you are outside of these four countries, chances that you're attracting investments in Africa is very low. Now, let's even, look further. You would also find that, and let's look at the data. In 2025, in the first half, about 117 million in investment was made available to startups. You'll find that those startups were in their end stages, and that's accounted for investment into about 82 startups or about 82 transactions. Yeah. You look at the number of the transactions, that tells you on the average how much is really getting into those startups. But what you will also find is that further down that journey, when you look at, growth stage startups, for example, we only had about 2 Series C investments in the same duration, 82 as against 2. And that's the story. We always talk about the value of bets. Startups come up with innovative ideas, design, they have their MVP. Some of them even go to pilots. But after that, downhill, they die. A lot of them. And there are several people across the continent waiting for those solutions that their lives could significantly be impacted by if those solutions make it at scale. So we're not lacking ideas. We're not lacking viable solutions. We're lacking investments to move the solutions from idea, from pilot, from MVP to scale. And that's one of the reasons why we're having this session this morning. Recently, we carried out an exercise. Oh, before I get into that, the funding landscape in Africa is also changing. Prior to now, most of the focus is on venture capital. How do we get investments from that? But more recently, one of the terminologies I've seen used a whole number of times over the last few years is blended financing. Recognizing that there are several sources of funds that can keep a tech company afloat. And so you would find that in Africa in general, there's been an increase in debt financing. Cumulatively, we have had over 116 billion in debt financing provided to startup founders. In addition to that, we've also seen that fund is continuing to increase year on year by 3%. But if I go around everybody online and I ask, how many of you are unique to our sessions? How do you position yourself for it? There'll be lots of question marks. In addition to that, we're also seeing grant funding made available to startups. It means that you have the opportunity to receive grants as a catalytic investment to move your idea, maybe to a pilot stage. How many startups have been able to access those grants? A number of times, forgive me, I said this morning, I said I'm biased towards African startups. I am biased. I recognize that there are international founders who are working within the African space and are really contributing to solving the problem. However, and a lot of these organizations are also attracting the funding because they can position themselves. But for every African founder that positions itself and gains this opportunity, I recognize as well that they are not only bringing, better healthcare to their communities and etc. with a good understanding of the context, but they are saving their families from poverty. They're providing jobs, right? Local jobs, and providing a sense of sustainability for several families. And so it's also important that we're able to attract that to African founders. Across board, I've talked about investment and funding coming into Africa. I mean, it's important for this conversation for us to also recognize that about 40% of all of these investments are going into fintech, and only 6% are coming into health. We carried out an exercise recently. There are several companies providing, organizations rather, providing grants. And the early part of this year, one of the things we noticed was that funders were interested in funding innovations, disruptive innovations in diagnostic tools. Based on the criteria provided, from a list of about 100, Ngozi, we're only able to cut down to about 30. And on that list of 30, we had a mix of founders that were African founders and others. And then with time, we cut down to about 3 based on the criteria following conversations. And I kid you not, we cut down to 0, 2 times for 2 opportunities. None of the founders met the requirements. Some of them had solutions that were working, but not validated by peer-reviewed journals. So you have a fantastic solution, no research to show that it works, and the funder is interested in that. In addition to that, your solution has not been validated. It's not been piloted at scale or reasonably for us to be able to put you forward. And there are lots of other criteria that funders look out for that I'm hoping that we'll discuss today. So what would make today's event a success? That you come into this room, physically or virtually, that you listen attentively to those that we brought on board. So what you have online is a representation of both sides. The investor, the funder, and the startup who has received funding. Ask your questions. Draw to the extent that you can from them and learn from all of us. We also want to make sure that this is a productive exercise. One of the themes for us this year is, we call it the year of evidence, which means that every event that we carry out, every program will show evidence of impact. And so the next session after now will be working very closely directly with selected startups and looking at opened opportunities and working with them to not just apply, but hopefully to also win those opportunities. I must also mention that we sit in a position where we interact with all forms of actors within the space. We have visibility into what's going on and also the interest that various stakeholders have. One of the things we're doing even more seriously going forward is partnering with startups to attract funding and investments, which means we are forming consortiums and collaborations with various startups directly. And one of the things we're doing going forward is to prioritize startups within our community, which is HTCA. So going forward, we're not going to be spending time reviewing 100 startups and coming down to 1 or 0. We're now going to be working with startups within our communities, training them and getting them ready to attract these investments, this funding, and working with them, collaborating with them for future opportunities. So as much as we're ready, you also have to be ready. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Becky, for that wonderful session. She has done a fantastic job setting the context of today's conversation. Next slide, please. Next slide. So we are going to be jumping right into our first session for the day. We're going to have Ronald share with us how you as a startup founder can begin to access beyond grants, what funders are looking for, what level financing is. So we'll be having him speak with us shortly. Are you having something? All right, so for the next section, we'll have Ronald share with us. Ronald is an investment professional who is focused on mobilizing private capital to strengthen healthcare systems across emerging markets. He currently works with the Health Finance Coalition. If your ear is on the ground, you would have heard of Health Finance Coalition and the recent funding that they had put together for health startups across Africa. His work spans the full investment life cycle, including pipeline development, due diligence, financial structuring, and post-investment value creation. But before all of this, Ronald has worked in private equity and impact investing with experience in financial analysis, deal execution, and ESG integration across sub-Saharan Africa. At this point, we can start giving him a round of applause as he comes up. And Ronald, it's our honor to have you here with us to share with us from your wealth of knowledge, and really, we are pleased to have you. So, without much ado, you can go ahead to share your slide and take us away.
Thank you, Ngozi. Thank you, CC Hub. Good morning or good afternoon, everyone, depending on where you're joining. I hope you can hear me well. So a big part of what we do is looking at businesses from a funder or investor perspective, but we also work directly with healthcare companies. And therefore, my aim during this session is to help you know how to position yourself to receive financing. I know the focus today is majorly on grant financing, but I want to enable you to see how you can position yourself beyond grant financing. And even when you receive this grant financing, how to use it optimally in order to achieve your business goals. So allow me to share my screen. I hope you can all see my screen. So as I mentioned, my aim today is to equip all of you to enable to receive grants and to use any capital that you receive optimally. Just to set the stage, these are some of the key things that we'll cover for the next few minutes. So first of all, it's how capital needs evolve as businesses grow. Dependent on the stage of the business that you're in, you will require different types of funding, and we will cover what the different capital types are and what expectations are for each type of funder and what they look for as they structure each type of capital. The second thing is blended finance. So it's a term that has been used a lot. What I'll do is I'll give some illustrative examples of what blended finance actually is. The Health Finance Coalition is also actively building this blended finance platform. So I'll give an not illustrative, but a real world structure of what a blended finance structure can look like and how startups or even growth stage or later stage businesses can benefit from these structures. As I mentioned, we have our own platforms and our own funds that we invest in, and we have the benefit of working really closely with different types of funders, so from grant providers all the way to more commercial capital. So we will cover what we typically assess before committing capital. We'll also look at what grant-ready businesses look like and what investment-ready businesses look like and what it takes to make this transition as you grow. And finally, during a due diligence process, I think this will be relevant both from a grant perspective, but also a commercial capital perspective. We look at some of the common gaps that delay or prevent startups and other entrepreneurs from receiving this capital. So before we get into the content, I think just to give everyone context of what the Health Finance Coalition does. So we're an organization that aims to mobilize capital to achieve public health goals. And we do that through a number of ways. The first is we conceptualize, design, and build blended finance vehicles, and then commit this capital to healthcare enterprises all over the world. What you can see here are 3 of our initiatives. I won't go into too much detail into each one of them, but what I want you to understand is all of these, they are types of blended finance vehicles, meaning they combine different types of capital. So for example, in the first one, the regional malaria elimination initiatives, you can see that we combine domestic financing grants and government funding in order to have a pool of funding that will go towards eliminating malaria in South America. The second one, which we call the Open Doors Initiative, or ODAFI, it also combined catalytic capital. Catalytic capital is basically patient, flexible capital that unlocks more commercial capital. So grant financing, for example, is catalytic capital because it's patient, it's more impact focused and commercial focused, and its aim is to unlock more commercial capital in the medium or long term. So ODAFI used catalytic capital and then unlocked commercial capital from the US government. And the last one, which is our most active fund, is called the Transform Health Fund. The Transform Health Fund is a joint initiative between ourselves and Afrikinvest. Afrikinvest is one of the largest private equity investors in the continent. So it's a joint venture between the two of us. It's a $111 million fund, and it's a blended fund, meaning we have donors, grant financiers in the same cap table or in the same capital stack as more commercial investors. We also have DFIs, and that way makes it a blended fund because we have commercial capital and also catalytic capital. The fund targets primarily growth stage businesses. It's mainly a debt fund, but we can also, if we deploy debt to your company, then we also have a pocket of grant financing that we can give to address very specific issues that the company is trying to address. So that's just to give overview of some of the blended finance structures we've done. Alongside this, we also have a platform that helps give direct support to businesses. So what this means is, for example, if we want to fund your business, but there are very specific risks that the business is facing that give us caution, then what we'll do is we'll come in as the Health Finance Coalition, give you support. This means give you, for example, support on a market entry strategy, or help you build a better model, or help with your forecast, or help with your budgeting, and that in that way de-risks your business. I'll get into a bit more detail later on in the slides as to what the key risks that we look at are. But the Transform Health Fund looks at these risks in the very same way, and also can give some grant financing to help address these risks. I think the content that I'll cover will be relevant for different types of businesses across the spectrum. And I don't know if any funders or any grant financiers or other capital providers are in the call as well. I think this will also help you position your financing more optimally and more efficiently, especially grant financing, because what we've seen is that grant financing in the current ecosystem may not be deployed in the most optimal way. It helps, but we believe that there's more that can be done, and I'll also give a few details on that. So just to zoom out a bit, here I want to show how capital typically evolves as a business grows, because one of the biggest challenges that we've seen as we look at businesses is not necessarily that the businesses are not good or there is access to funding, but rather that there tends to be a misalignment between the right type of funding and the stage of the business. And the challenge is that many businesses either access later stage capital too early, or they stay in early stage capital forms longer than they should, which means that, for example, a business is a later stage business, but is still sourcing grant capital, and that tends to be detrimental to the business in the medium or long term. And different types of capital come with different expectations, and as your business grow, these expectations change quite significantly. So at the idea stage, the capital here is focused mainly on getting started and proving that the problem exists and that your solution is worth exploring. And here, funders are not looking for a full business with a team and a set goal. It's more proving that your problem exists and it's worth exploring. And many times here, it's also just backing the faith in the founder and the concept rather than a full business. And then as you grow to the validation stage, and I think this is where grants become really important. Here you're testing the model, you're running early pilots, you are starting to show early traction. And this is where many founders tend to get comfortable because grant capital fits in this stage really well. And many founders tend to remain in this phase and keep receiving grant capital. And then you stay in this stage for too long and you get to the point where you're meant to receive commercial capital, but the commercial investor looks at the business and is like, this seems to be a grant dependent business and therefore I won't touch it. And this is a mistake that many businesses make. So it's very important to know when to make the switch and the inflection point that you reach such that you're now in the early growth phase. And in the early growth phase, I think this is where the inflection point occurs. So here expectations start to really shift, which means that funders begin to look for a real business and not just a strong pilot or early traction. This is where things like revenue and repeat customers and your unit economics being clear and having a really good sense of the market and having a good team really start to take center stage. And here you'll see where this is where angel investors come into play. You'll have a bit more sophisticated financial instruments like safes, or now your grant won't be a pure grant. It will be a grant that's expected to be recovered over time. So here investors become a bit more critical of the business because now it's no longer just a concept or an idea. It's now beginning to take shape and be a real business. And then the last stage is the scale stage. And here it's not experimentation anymore. It's investors asking how sustainable is this business in the long run? How stable is it? How predictable are revenues? And as I mentioned earlier, the key takeaway here is that it's not just a type of capital that changes, it's expectations change, and what it takes to secure a grant is not the same as what it takes to secure commercial capital. And also the specific challenges or specific, sorry, there's an echo. Yeah, the specific use of funds for a grant type business or for you applying for a grant tends to be very different from receiving equity or venture capital money. So it requires you to build internal capabilities and skills in order to receive this capital and know what the key risks are. And that's what I'll cover in the next few slides. Now that you've seen what the different capital types are, I think it's important to know what the arising models of new financing are. Finance is evolving and there's different stakeholders involved with different expectations, both from a return perspective and also from an impact perspective. And at the same time, the macroeconomic environment is very rapidly changing. Within the context of Africa and other markets, it's an increasingly difficult market, and the business models are also very complex. And that's why a newer way of deploying capital is needed. And also what we found that is like healthcare companies, because of the way they're set up, require a different and more flexible way of financing that traditional funding may not really be able to cover. And that's why blended finance comes up. What blended finance is using different capital types. So grants, government money, equity, debt, fast loss capital. So basically using different forms of capital in order to reduce the risk and meet different shareholder expectations. What you'll find common within blended finance vehicles is that there is a catalytic tranche of money. And as I mentioned earlier, catalytic means flexible, more focused on impact. And catalytic, it's called catalytic because it catalyzes commercial money. So the aim of catalytic capital is to unlock or de-risk commercial capital. And grant capital is, I think, the most common form of grant of catalytic capital. And then commercial capital, I think you're all familiar with. It will be equity, it will be debt, it will be that type of capital. And just how some illustrative blended finance structures is what I've highlighted here. So there can be a grant and debt blended finance structure. And what the grant fund, for example, if you're a company and you are looking to grow, two investors may come together separately, or even one within the same capital tranche can bring together grant funding and debt capital. That grant capital supports market validation, early priorities, and things that may not generate immediate returns. There's also forms where grant capital can be used to lower the interest rate of the debt capital. That's called a interest buy down or a debt buy down, and therefore makes the debt capital a bit less riskier. And then the debt capital, since it's more long-term, it's more focused on sustainability, can be used for capex, inventory expansion, and other elements that are more long-term. So here what you can see is that the grant funding, since it led with market validation, knowing what the market is, where there's opportunity or an interest buy down, unlocks the debt capital, and that's why it's a blended finance structure. In grant and equity, it works similarly, whereby the grant funding can help fund pilots or build early traction and generate evidence that builds investor confidence, which then de-risks or makes the investor have a bit less caution, and then equity capital can then support expansion, and it's more long-term. I think this is what a lot of, I mean, the first two is what is more common in the market right now, but we're getting more sophisticated models that, for example, that I highlighted earlier, whereby it's different. It can be domestic financing, it can be government financing and other forms of capital, but I think these are two very common archetypes of blended finance vehicles. And then the last one is first loss and debt. First loss is basically when an investor or a catalytic investor says, if there's a specific project and, for example, if it's expansion to a new market, the catalytic investor commits that any of the first losses, it's them who take the hit instead of the commercial investor. And that then reduces the lender's risk and improves confidence. It's almost like a guarantee, like a bank guarantee in a way, but just structured a bit differently. And in the same way that capital, so since we have first loss capital, that makes the investor a bit more risk tolerant, and then unlocks the debt capital. So the key takeaway here is you can use different capital types and be a bit more creative in the way that you are raising your capital. And also the aim, just for your own knowledge, the aim of catalytic capital is to unlock commercial capital. So you're not raising grant capital just for the sake of raising grant capital. And even for any funders, I think when you are deploying your capital, your grant capital, it shouldn't just be for short-term use. Or I mean, I think the effects can be a bit more profound if it unlocks more commercial capital or has more lasting impacts into the company. So one of the blended finance vehicles that the Health Finance Coalition is currently working on is called the Multiply Health Fund. The Multiply Health Fund is also a joint venture between ourselves and a company called Vilgrow Africa. I know some of you might have heard of it. And what we are trying to address is this valley of death that has been talked about, whereby companies have received grants. They're now the inflection point whereby they need commercial capital, but they don't know how to get there. And that's what the Multiply Health Fund is trying to address. So the Multiply Health Fund will be a catalytic capital vehicle, meaning it will primarily use grants in order to attract commercial investors. So this will be through instruments like guarantees, first loss capital, debt buy downs, and such instruments with a specific aim of unlocking commercial investors. And what the Multiply Health Fund will do, and I think when you are also seeking investors, capital alone is often not enough to get you to the next stage. You also need a partner that will give you guidance and knowledge on how to navigate the specific issues that you are having in your business. And that's where the Multiply Health Fund will combine catalytic capital, technical assistance, so trying to work with entrepreneurs to address very specific risks in order to unlock that are preventing them from unlocking commercial capital, and investor engagement. So we have a whole ecosystem of investors, of commercial investors that will engage in order to help these startups or founders or other type of businesses to unlock commercial capital. So this is just an illustrative or real, not illustrative, but rather real life example of what how blended finance can work. We are currently fundraising for it, but we are getting good traction. We're also working closely with investors and other founders to bring it to fruition. So here, what I want to do is just simplify how funders, or how we look at businesses when assessing them. And what we typically ask is it's not as simple as, is this a good business or is this a bad business? It's more, what are the risks and how comfortable am I with them? And what is the founder or what is the business doing to help mitigate these risks? So for early stage businesses, risk is expected, and the question is not whether the risk exists, it's rather, is it understood well and is it reducing over time? And this table is essentially how many funders think. There might be more risks than this, but I think these are the key ones or the broad ones that typical funders normally look at. First is market risk, and what this asks is, does the solution you're offering matter to anyone? And what reduces this risk is not what I see many founders do, which is giving large or macroeconomic numbers, like there is a $30 billion market, or there's a $100 billion market, or there are X number of people who are addressing this. I think that's good to give a macroeconomic view or a large scale picture, but what really helps funders feel like this is being addressed is more specific evidence relevant to the business. So early customers, repeat usage. If you are pre-revenue, maybe you've done some customer service, even anecdotal evidence from people within the market that you serve can really help mitigate this risk. Yeah, so basically here, the key question is there real demand? And what helps mitigate it is just through some sort of customer traction. And then there's growth risk. And what this is asking basically is, even if the model is working once, can it work repeatedly? And is it sustainable over time? And what funders are asking here is, can this move beyond a pilot, or is it dependent on just one single context or one single location or something like that? And this is where a clear expansion plan comes into play. And this is where evidence that the founder has put in systems that work in the long term matter. Yeah. And then financial risk, I think, is often where many businesses struggle, and not because the historical or forecasted performance is bad. It's just that the numbers are often not clear, or there's inconsistency. Here, I think it's a simple thing. So clean records, good budgeting, realistic forecasts can really significantly help improve confidence for investors. And then lastly, it's execution risk, which just means, can the company have the capacity to deliver what they are claiming to deliver? And here, what helps mitigate it is having a strong team, clear rules, and basically showing that you have the operational discipline to use the capital that is being that is being given to you properly. And I think even for early stage businesses, even pre-revenue, all this, I mean, these risks, they might evolve and they might change over time, but I think any type of funder will want to at least have a certain level of comfort that these things are being looked at. And I'm not saying that we are expecting all these risks to disappear, or we are expecting no risks, just that it's important to show that you're thinking about risk. We don't expect perfection. It's just the intention that is more important, and that to show that these risks are reducing or will reduce over time. I hope that's clear. So here, this slide is just to show how a business can evolve from a grant-supported business, which is important. What are the requirements to then grow to a commercial capital-ready business? So grant-supported businesses, it's more, I think the first two stages of growth I showed earlier. So at the idea stage or at the validation stage. Later on, we've given grants for later stage businesses, and there can also benefit. But I think what's important here is that you are using your grant capital appropriately to address some of these risks that are highlighted here. So, and you need to show that it's generating some sort of impact, because impact is also very important to grant financiers. So it's important to show that your grant capital is being used to address some either market risk or even operational risk that are not highlighted here, which is another, I think, key risk that tends to arise. And then as you grow to commercial capital ready businesses, I think what's needed is what I've highlighted in the middle here. So stronger financial discipline. So you no longer don't have audited statements. I mean, at the beginning, we don't expect you to have audited statements, but as the company is growing, we expect a degree of certainty in the numbers. So when you see, for example, revenue is $100,000, we need to see that there is a degree of certainty and discipline that has been used to ascertain that this is actually the numbers. We need to see a credible growth plan, which means you don't need a very detailed model, you don't need a very detailed forecast, but just that you're able to tell your story properly and you're able to show that there is growth within the next few years for your business. And once you make this transition to scale, I think once you now get to a commercial capital ready business is where now businesses or where funders tend to see that there is actually a long-term growth for returns and impact. But I think the key message here is what you need to transition is just to see that you are you're more operationally feasible and you have a stronger degree of discipline in the company. So also, lastly, what I'd like to cover is the common funding readiness gaps, and talking as a more commercial investor, and just to know what you should expect is investors tend to have a due diligence process. The degree of rigor or the degree of thoroughness varies, or what they even cover varies business to business. But typically there'll be a financial due diligence, there'll be a commercial due diligence, there'll be a legal due diligence, and maybe an ESG due diligence. And many founders tend to falter in different ways within this due diligence process. So I'll just cover what where the entrepreneurs typically falter. So the first one is more of market gap. So you have a strong idea but limited validation. Those first two stages of growth, whereby you're still proving your concept, is very important, because if you don't have early customer feedback, you don't have any partnership, you don't have any degree of interest from any company, then it's very difficult to make the transition from a grant focused business to a commercial focused business, because as I mentioned, what we look for is long-term sustainability. The second one is weak financial visibility, and I think I've covered this. Basically, no financial discipline. I know it's common for founders, especially at the early stages, whereby there is a very thin line between you and the business. So for example, your financials are mixed up. When it's very early stage, that's fine. But as you continue to grow, then it becomes more important that we see that there's a clear separation between yourself and the business, and there's a clear budget, realistic focus, and basically a simple plan for managing funds in the long term. The third is unclear use of funds. I think that's self-explanatory. Basically, you give a plan, but it doesn't. You just say, I want $1 million, and you don't really break down what the use of funds is, or you give inconsistent use of funds. I think capital providers, regardless of whether they're grant providers or commercial capital, want to have a degree of confidence that their funds will be used, what their mandate is focused on them to use, but also that it will be used well to reach their goals and their milestones. So I think it's very important to have a unclear use of funds. And then the last one is limited pathway to skill, which means that it may be attractive in the short term, but the next stage is not defined. There's no sustainability. And you have to have a clear focus or a clear way of showing that your business will actually grow in the long term. So I think within the due diligence process, in my own experience, where many businesses tend to falter is the financials bit, whereby you may have all the records, but they're just very unclear or inconsistent. So I think it's very important to build a discipline in your team and in yourself very early on to have very clear budgets and clear records of what your financials are. And then for the rest, I think it'll just come into play as you continue to grow. Yeah, thank you. I'll stop there. I hope my presentation has been clear, and yeah, happy to take any questions when the time comes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ronald. We're going to give opportunity for questions later on. So if you have any question, kindly drop it in the chat and we will do well to read the question. We've also received some questions before today. We're also going to take some questions from those questions that we have received. So please feel free to drop your questions. We're going to dive right into the next segment of today's conversation. But to do that, I would invite my colleague Ada to introduce the next speaker. So,
hi everyone, good to see you all. My name is Ada and I'm the Community and Comms Intern with Design for Health. And I have pleasure of introducing our next speaker. We have Bertrand Pedersen, who is a private sector partnership and innovation manager at Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance. So Bertrand is an experienced manager at the private sector partnership and innovation at Gavi. He engaging with private sectors to collaborate on funding, expertise, innovation, and advocacy partnerships with the aim to tackle global health and development priorities. He's also in charge of Infuse, Gavi's Innovation Scaling Hub, a platform to identify the most promising approaches and technologies and accelerate immunization system upgrades for the world's most in-need countries. So please put your hands together for Bertrand. Use your emojis, and those here, please put your hands together. Thank you very much.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be here with you guys. So thank you for the invites, and let's dive right into it. So let me ask you a couple of rhetorical questions to see if that resonates with you. How many of you have actually built something that works, a solution that is really improving outcomes in the field, that is faster, cheaper, more reliable than what came before? And how many of you have actually struggled to get that solution to the people who needs the most and at the scale that it deserves? And so that's basically that gap, and that I'm sure you've heard and seen and witnessed and suffered from. That is that gap that Infuse is trying to tackle. That's the gap between something that works and something that is proven and at scale. And this is what I'm gonna talk about today. So I hope you can see the slide. I'll move on to the second one. So basically, our innovation efforts are rooted in a very famous partnerships by now. Many of you have probably heard about Zipline. We started to partner with them back in 2016 to see how we could use drone delivery. And we started working together in Rwanda. So it's a country very famous for the Thousand Hills. leading to hard-to-reach communities. And it really changed the way we deliver drones in many ways in the countries, and now actually also in Nigeria, where we're working in Bayelsa, Cross River, Kaduna states, to name a few. And working with Zipline, that's what we were thinking. It's great, we have an innovation that is a game changer, but how can we identify more innovation on our groundbreaking ideas? And that's why we launched Infuse. Infuse is in a way a scaling hub that aims to really simplify the uptake of innovation in global health. So here we wrote global health innovation, but it's to be understood that innovation that can be applied to global health. For example, the drone have nothing to do per se with vaccines initially until we use them in the right way. And we connect needs and solution in real time by also offering a set of services to the different stakeholders. So as I mentioned, Infuse was launched in 2016, already a decade of innovation. And it really helps to connect those high impact proven innovation with the countries that needs them the most. And I really want to to put an emphasis on the aspect of need. That's what the needs of the country is really what's driving Infuse. So how does it work? Basically, every year we have a new call for application. And the program focuses on the full immunization delivery chain. So it can be cold chain logistics, last mile distribution, demand generation, digital health system, supply chain visibility, community engagements. So if your solution touches one of these areas and has potential to reach the children who are currently being missed by routine immunization, that's what Infuse wants to hear about. So every year we define a new thematic. Some example you can see here on the screen. They can be focusing on a very specific technology like biometrics. They can be more transversal technology like data. They can be looking at the geographic challenges like urbanization, etc., etc. So the last call for application we had was actually in 2024. We are currently working on the next one, and it was looking at the climate change and how this increases vulnerability, as well as bringing more disease sensitive to climate conditions such as malaria. So a few words about what you should expect as an innovator. We call them the pace setter. So basically, we receive application to Infuse on those call for applications. So you see on the left here, we have 100, 200 applicants every time that are trying to get with us. The call for innovation, each year we have a panel of reviewers that really select the most innovative technologies and approaches, with always in mind the future potential to improve immunization delivery. The top 10 are invited to an Infuse workshop. And at that workshop, that's really where we bring what we see as the Infuse community. So it can be businesses, innovators, of course, but also private sector partners who are willing to take a chance. It can be the local civil society. Of course, it's always with a representative of different Ministry of Health that we work with. The different organization as well. Gavi is an alliance, so we work with WHO, UNICEF, to name a few, potential implementing partners as well. So we bring basically the community together at the workshop and identify the most promising innovation. These innovation, they get support, tailored supports. And with the aim that we want to try that innovation in a global health immunization context to really show that the concept is working. Once that is done, we move to the next stage, which is the proof of scale, with always the ultimate goal of moving at a large scale. So I mentioned it a bit, but I really want to put an emphasis on the fact that Infuse is about building the power of connection. It's not really a grant program, and Ronald gave us a lot of great insight on grants, equity, etc. We sit in between all those financing models. We're not a grants program. We're not really an accelerator in the traditional sense. It's something a bit more specific and arguably a bit more demanding for us and for the innovators. It's really a connecting mechanism. It exists to identify innovation at that critical inflection points and bring them with the right person in mind. And to If you are selected for Infuse, you basically gain three main aspects that you can struggle to access on your own. The first one is visibility, second is validation, and the third is connection to scale. So let's say a few words on each of them. Visibility means that your solution is surfaced to Gavi-supported country, to the Gavi teams, to the different ministries of health that we work with, to the implementing partners, but not through the cold email, but basically through curated, credible process where you're placed in rooms that you wouldn't get access otherwise. Validation means that your solution has been going through a whole system that we've just seen on the slide before. That is a rigorous assessment and structured process to help you de-risk and be successful. And that stamp of recognition, it does matter enormously. We have procurement officers, health systems, bilateral donors. They are all quite risk averse, and they need to know that someone credible has done the due diligence, and that's what Infuse provide as a signal. The third way is the pathway to scale. So Infuse connects the innovators with the private sector partners, and we'll have more on this later. But they also connect with them with distribution networks, financing capacities, operational presence in different markets where most startups don't have necessarily the means to enter by themselves. And so this is not an introduction for the sake of a networking moment. It's really a more structured engagement to help you grow. And I want to also mention that the pathway is not passive. Being selected open doors, but walking through those doors, bringing the clarity on what you need, on what you can deliver is still what we expect from our innovators. We're not looking, also another aspect is we're not looking for the most craziest technologies. We work in a pretty harsh environment. So it's not about the most polished pitch deck. It's really about the evidence that you can bring that your solution actually solved a bottleneck that we've identified through the country needs. And that has been tested in the context where it's meant to operate, which is the Gavi supported country. And ultimately, one of the key aspects is the credible path to scaling. So let me give you a bit of example on who we've been working with, and I hope some of these names will resonate. We've cultivated now a community of startup innovation, of startup innovator. We're working currently with more than 15 of them in different countries. I think it's now more than 16, 17 countries. And what is also interesting is to see that some of them have scaled to multiple countries. As you can see, we're not limited to a country, to a region. We're really looking to implement the solution where the needs are and any countries that are actually benefiting from Gavi support. So the footprint really is global. Another aspect that I want to emphasize is the role of our private sector partners. We do have innovators who are bringing some great innovation, but are still a bit far to implement it on the ground. And that's where our private sector partners can really bring a huge difference. If I take the example of Zipline, when we started to work together in 2016, they had very limited knowledge about cold chain, and cold chain is absolutely critical for us. And that's where we paired them with the UPS, the foundation arm of UPS, but also the company, obviously a global leader in logistics, to really understand how they should handle those cold chain aspects. And that's where you get a learning curve that is accelerated by having the experts that bring that expertise for free very often to our innovators. Another example is Simprints, where they are benefiting from the support of ARM. ARM is a company that is building microchips. Both of them are actually in the UK. And bringing those two together means a hardware that is going to the next level. We also help Simprints on the algorithm of the biometrics. So it's the biometric solution on the biometrics recognition, working with another company called NEC. So really multiple partners are also possible. Finally, the last example is Nextleaf. Nextleaf is a cold chain monitoring equipment solution that creates a lot of data, and that data is absolutely valuable and really important for us. And of course, who knows better than data than Google. So here as well, we had a financing and an expertise-based partnership that really helped both companies grow on that field. One of the other aspects is when you start working with Infuse, when you start to apply with Infuse, there is a long-term view, and that is scaling. I think, Ronald, you also mentioned a different type of funding, and here it's also reflected. We identified that Infuse was mostly looking at grants, when the scale up and the scaling needed different type of funding. And that's why we're currently building the next step of Infuse to really have an end-to-end pipeline for the innovation we bring. And that is the one that have been proven will benefit from the support, from further support that Infuse cannot directly provide with the use of the scale-up facility that we're developing. So more diverse capital, more different type of support basically from the Infuse one, and this is under development. Last words that I wanted to mention, and it's really how can you be successful in applying with Infuse? So you see on the left side kind of rough criteria that we are looking at. Those criteria are being revised every year depending on the call for application, but you have some key aspects that remains kind of the northern lights, if we can call it so. The first one is how easily can you get to scale? Does it mean that if we invest in your solution, what is the return on investment that we have to expect before we can actually reach scale? The second one is really the impacts. At the end of the day, that's what we're measuring at Gavi against as well, is how many children we've saved, how many we've immunized, how many children we've saved, how many children we've identified, and making sure that we leave no zero dose children, the children who have never benefited from a dose of vaccines behind. The third aspect is, of course, the business model, making sure that you have a sound tech integration, that you have a clear revenue models that does not only rely on grants. At the end of the day, we want to disappear as an organization and make sure that you can be successful on your own with the country you work with and not be only dependent on grants. The adaptability aspect is quite similar in an idea to the point of scaling. Is we're serving more than 50 countries in the world, and what works in a specific setting should be, of course, not copy pasted, but at least adaptable and replicable to other settings. And the final aspect, that's probably a very common aspect to many call for application, is the idea of who's the team, who's the leadership behind, what kind of track record, what kind of expertise they have on the topic. And so on the right side of the slide, you have different aspects that we can put some more emphasis on in those efforts. So this aspect of ROI is something that I want to mention. Is the idea that you really need to show that you have well-defined impact metrics, and the selection we're doing is not based on the potential only, but really what has been done so far to really give us faith that it's actually reachable in a rather short time frame. Second aspect we've mentioned on terms of in-market and replicability. And the third one is this aspect of having a clear point of differentiation. Your solution is coming to solve a problem that we have, a bottleneck. So that's really what you should be focusing on, is help us build the story, the narrative around how you're fixing, what is the problem you're fixing, and what is making you really a mappable to a program need. And finally, I mentioned that briefly previously, know your ask. We're coming in a collaborative manners. So really understanding how we can help you, allow us to match you with the best partners, to provide the right tailored supports, and as well to open the right country doors for you. So that's in a nutshell what I wanted to talk about. Looking forward to your question, and on to the next.
Thank you so much for that session, Bertrand. It was really, I like to think that it was very insightful for everyone that had listened to you, particularly how Confused is really supporting startups across the globe and how they can, plug into the money, plug into the opportunity. We do have some questions. Please, if you have some questions for Bertrand, also do drop it in the chat. I know we have some questions in the chat box. Please carry them out. So I'll read out some of the questions that we have. We also have some questions from people who sent over some pre-questions. I will read out those ones as well. But Bertrand, Ronald, you have some questions. I think the first question in chat was, thank you for it was from Abduhab somewhere. I know if you're here, I think you can, please feel free to unmute your mic and also ask your question. I know Yusuf had a question here, so please feel free to unmute after this one. Abduhab somewhere said, thank you for the presentation. In relation to startups from Nigeria, does the company need to be registered to access grants or support? They asked this question for now, but I think it's...
Well, first of all, to be clear, as an organization, we don't provide grants. Our current active vehicle provides debt. If you are in Nigeria, you need to be registered. We can provide financing to businesses in Nigeria, and also would be, especially from a de-risking perspective, if the business has operations also outside Nigeria. But just from, we don't provide grants, but if you are receiving financing from any of our funds, then it would need to be a fully registered business. I think what's most important is you need to have a bit of track record, because as financiers, we look at your historical performance. So we, as a fund, we won't look at a startup, but we are able to help you think through some of your key needs.
Thank you so much for that. The next question that we have here was from Yusuf. This will be the last one for you, Ronald, before we come back to question and answer session. I say, thank you, Ronald. Can you talk more about networking as regards positioning for branding? What is your advice, particularly from the non-technical part of getting a brand? I know that sorry, we're going to touch on this as well, but Ronald, please feel free to say it in also.
Yeah, I think it's about being in the right ecosystems. First of all, I think being in a session like this is helpful. So being in sector events, programs like this, interacting with ecosystem players, incubators, whether it's CC Hub, whether it's Vilgro, and all the other great platforms in Nigeria or otherwise. It's I think a lot of opportunities come through being visible rather than just through applications. And that brings me to my next point, whereby you need to really build relationships before you get the funding. For some of the businesses that we've looked at, we've had the relationship either personal or through the company for a prolonged period of time. So you're already known to the partners, there's already a rapport, and we already have a sense of who the person is, because as I said before, often financing is not, especially at the early stages, it's not only to the business, you're also investing in the person. So I think having a good relationship, so we're able to get updates or even a referral, then it makes the networking element much easier and makes you more successful, and even just known to the community. Yeah.
Thank you so much for that. I do agree with you on that particular point. I know that Ruben is also going to touch on it as well. But I believe the next question we have will be for Bertrand. We still have some more questions, but I'm just keeping some in the interest of time. We can take them after Dr. Ikon's session. Your question, Bertrand, they said, how do you get to shortlist your pace setters? Is it through outreach or through personal connection? I think this a little bit. Then the second question is, Can businesses in their pilot stage apply for the infuse, or there must be evidence of revenue?
Yeah, two good questions. First of all, the application is made through a call for application that we publish on our website and communicate around. So you can just follow the different social media account from Gavi, and you will see the call for application when it's put out. So it's not outreach; it's through our outreach, but not through personal connection. And the second question, we are looking at companies that can scale. So typically having just one idea in a garage is not going to make it. So it's good to have some market traction, some proof of revenue. That's always definitely taken as a bonus points. It's not a mandatory thing, but I would tend to say it's very important.
Thanks so much. Thanks a lot for that. For the next session, we have with us one of us. He's really one of us. He's a member of the HTCA community. He has been able to access some funding. And so for his next session, we'd like him to share with us how did he do it? What did he do to do it? What buttons did he press to get it? So we have here with us Dr. Ibukun Tundeoni. He's the Chief Executive Officer of HTCA Medical, a health technology and emergency medical systems company that is saving life across Nigeria. He has over 14 years of experience, and his work spans pre-hospital emergency care, aeromedical aviation, health systems innovation, healthcare management, emergency medicine, safety auditing, and safety management. That's quite something. As a two-time health tech founder, a successful exit, Dr. Tunde has built solutions that strengthen healthcare delivery. Under his leadership, HTCA Medical has developed a national emergency access platform integrating USSD, IVR, WhatsApp, and call center infrastructure to enable ambulance identification, triage, dispatch, and monitoring. In recognition of his impact advancing the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, HTCA Medical received the IF Social Impact Prize 2025. His work is proudly supported by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and of course, the Co-Creation Hub. We're helping build digital health infrastructure in health, and also improve the emergency response systems across Nigeria. And so with a warm round of applause, we would like to welcome Dr. Tunde Oni as he takes us through the grant writing training aspect of this. So this is the part where if you have not been writing before, this is the time for you to bring out your pen and your paper and start writing. And so with a warm round of applause, Tunde, the floor is yours. Thank you. He's going to be taking his session from here. It's live here in person at our space. Could you share your slides with me? Should you share?
Hello, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon. Depending on where you are in the world. My name is Ibukun Tundeoni, and like Ngozi mentioned, I'm a medical doctor, but also I'm founder of HTCA Medical. And we're here to go through like a grants, I say readiness session. I don't like to think I'm an expert, right? But I have, like, in my short span and time alive, won a few grants for our organization. And that is by no means by myself alone. I mean, my whole team. And we have been able to win grants together, as we'll see through the series of training. So we'll start with what a grant is. I don't know how interactive this session can be.
Yeah, people can obviously speak.
Oh, they can read and speak. Oh, great, fantastic. So, I mean, going from what Ronald and Bertrand have said, I think it's that should be an answer that anybody should be able to give us today. All right. So I think anyone on the call, kindly unmute and respond if you do know what the grant is. And if you're paying attention to Ronald and Bertrand. So I guess this is the test session. All right. If you came on the call and you wanted to, or you're looking to be able to win grants, what is a grant based on what Ronald and Bertrand have said? So you have Expo. You've got an Expo. Anybody?
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello, am I audible?
Yes, very audible. Please introduce
Thank
yourself.
you. This is Olaide from Fighter. Okay, thank you. My name is Olaide Olawu from Fighter Bridge.
Nice to meet you.
Grants is a funding given to support your innovation based on the impact, and it's not refundable. Thank you. Equity-free funding to scale your impact.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for that. I like what you said at the end. It's not refundable. Everybody likes non-refundable credit. So, anybody else before we go into my own definition of what a grant is? Anybody else? Thank you very much, Olaide.
Good afternoon. My name is Yusuf Adesoji from Evidence of Good. I think my idea of grants from the session so far is a type of funding model that usually supports businesses at early stage to build production, and also it's a non-debt funding that is non-refundable, as the speaker said. Over. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Someone also said is on what was that? I saw something about money you don't give back as well, and then someone said it's used to de-risk your innovation. Fantastic. So let's go to where a grant is. First, yeah. So like you've all said, grants is money or sometimes resources. I know a lot of you said money, right? But sometimes actually resources, not necessarily cash. Given to individuals, organizations, or a company to achieve a specific purpose without the obligation to repay it back, right? Funding given to solve a problem or create impact, not to generate profit for the funder, right? There's no obligation to repay it, but as we'll see throughout the session, right, you do have a responsibility, all right, to give feedback on what it is you have done with the money, all right? So you don't have to give it back like in a loan, right? But you are accountable, and that's the word. The word is accountability. You are accountable for the grant. So please, next slide. Thank you very much to those who contributed. Next slide, please. So what is the challenge today, right? About grant readiness. Why aren't we getting grants, right? And it's because of the thoughts, the approach, perception, and understanding. Is there anyone on the call who has actually tried to apply for grants and has gotten rejected or just hasn't? I guess most of us, I'll say most of us haven't maybe started. But any on the call who wants to give us a perspective of their challenge with any grant they've written? Anybody? Feel free to unmute your mic.
Hello, everyone. My name is Dr. Adora Isabella Odis. I've written a grant to WHO on COVID-19 recovery for routine immunization, and I got it. I've written a couple of other ones. Some were not successful, but this one were just 2 that were picked from Nigeria and 20 from all over the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. What's the name of your company? Ada, what's the name of your company?
I'm an independent researcher.
Okay.
So it was an individual grant that we were given after we were trained for 2 months May to June 2022. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that's an example, and I will see it as well, right? In the process of going through the slides, that she's a researcher. She's not a company. She's not an organization. He said, I mentioned earlier, individuals, organizations, or companies, right, can actually get grants, right? Institutions, schools. But the challenge really with grant readiness, right, and coming over to this side of being a startup is the thoughts, the approach, right, the perception of what we think grants are, right, and the understanding of the grant itself, right? Next slide, please. So the perception really is that people said, oh, on the call just now, that it's money you don't have to pay back. Everybody likes free money, right? But in reality, like, they say there's no free lunch in Freetown, right? It comes with some responsibility. People think grants are charity, right? Free money with no consequence, responsibility. Once you get the money, you're out the door, you run somewhere else, right? But the reality of it is that there is accountability that comes with every single dime, right, that you're giving. Even your funders are accountable, right? Sometimes to their donors, right? Or sometimes to organizations that collaborate with them, right? Grant is basically capital for solving problems that markets haven't fixed yet, right? So someone mentioned earlier, is to de-risk your innovation. It's like, oh, I'm not sure if this will work, right? So I want a grant to do this, right? I think Bertrand also mentioned that it's also a signal of validation, right? And that's how Infuse looks at startups. That's what you get, right? You get validation, you get connections, right? It's also a market entry tool, he mentioned as well, into rooms that you would ordinarily not get into, right? Which is especially public sector. If you think about it, right, the public sector generally, especially in healthcare, is the largest buyer of health, right? So how do you get into the public sector? Most times, and I use an example of our organizations, most times you want to have your state government support you. You want to sell yourself to a state government, and instead to tell you, I don't have money. It's like, I don't have money for that. It's not in my budget. Because if you want to work with the state, you have to be able to get part of their budget, right, to attribute it to you, right? And Bertrand will be able to tell that because that's exactly how Zipline works in certain states, right? They've worked and they have grants that have funded them up to the point that they're able to now get matching funds from the state, right, to execute on the work that they do, right? So in Africa, grants often unlock systems before revenue can scale, right? And I have another perspective on that, which we'll see. Next slide, please. Feel free to, can we ask questions during or after? Okay, after. Okay, so please keep your questions after. So we're basically going to go through like a practical outcome-driven work plan designed to move the health innovators on the call or other people in other tech sectors. I'm assuming everyone on the call is in the healthcare sector. From funding awareness to competitive applications, covering both early stage grant awareness, preparation, and readiness, right? And this is basically the outline for the call today. Who are you? Why are you? What will you do? Or what will you? Then we go into grant writing, then Q&As, and then next steps for you, right? Next slide, please. So I said, who are you? So I'm going to introduce myself once again. I'm a solo founder, right? CEO of 8 Medical, a physician or medical doctor, it depends on what country you're in. A health tech entrepreneur, I'm 3-time founder with 1 exit. So I've actually sold a company before, also in healthcare. I'm currently building the operating system for emergency care in Africa. Our organization, which is 8 Medical, or I like to say as well, cuts across healthcare, and we'll see why I'm introducing myself like this. Cuts across healthcare, logistics, mobility, or logistics or supply chain, mobility, climate, infrastructure, artificial intelligence, and spatial distribution, right? I have been, we have been as an organization, recipient of the Ninja JICA Accelerator Grant, recipient of CC Hub's DPI Partner Ecosystem Project, supported by Gates Foundation, recipient of Eve's Design Award recently for 2025. We are also funded commercially by Catalyst Fund, Techstars, Expert Dojo, amongst others, really. Next slide, please. So question is, who are you? Who can introduce themselves the way I just did? Anybody? Any founder on the call?
Here.
Oh, isn't here, yes. Isn't here. Anybody? No, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Okay. My name is Uchenna, and I am the Assistant Product Manager Technical at Homies Health Nigeria. Homies Health Nigeria is a telemedicine platform, and it's an all-in-one platform that connects patients to medical practitioners. And we actually have an EMR system, that is an emergency medical recording system, that enables us to have a database of all the patients that we take care of. And recently, we partnered with AMPA, which is an association of Nigerian physicians who are living in America. So last week, we were in Imo State, where we did a medical patient outreach, and using our EMR system, we're able to record more than 1,500 patients. And with that, the government of Imo State have the database of their indigents who participated in the free medical outreach. Thank you, and I'm happy to be here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So that's a great introduction, right? And basically, if you go through his introduction, based on what he said, right? He gave us his name, right? Name of his organization, right? They identified themselves, right? Basically told us about their problem, sort of like went through his industry briefly, gave us a solution, right? And somewhere in there, you can possibly maybe sort of like get the vision and purpose of what it is that they're trying to achieve. Next slide, please. So question is, who are you as a person, right? And I ask this all the time. I introduce myself, right? So knowing yourself, what it is you do, what it is you live for as an individual also helps to know how you want to position your organization, right? Who are you as a person? Like, what do you live to solve? I personally have always said, I used to work as a doctor in a hospital, not far from here, actually. And I used to always say something that I was bored, right, with actually getting to see patients one-on-one every day. I didn't feel like I was achieving enough impact. I didn't feel like I was giving back. It's like, okay, in a whole day, how many patients do you see? In a very, very big general hospital, maybe one doctor can see maybe 200 patients a day, all right? So in a month, you maybe see 600, if I, that is not funny, 6,000, right? And if you think about it, I didn't think it was enough impact, right? I wanted a situation where I was doing a one-to-many relationship, where with one stroke of a pen or with one thing, I could solve problems for millions of people at once. Hence why I'm in emergency care, and that's what my company does, right? So understanding you as a person or as a problem solver, right, is part of who you are and part of what you have to understand before you even think of even writing grants generally or even setting up a company, right? Are you technical? Are you non-technical? Are you a consultant? Are you a jack of many trades, right? Technical would be that you have technical ability in your startup or in your organization, right? Non-technical would be that you have no technical ability. So for instance, if you're building an Uber, right, or a tech startup, like a banking app, you should have a CTO, right, who's technical, really, right? It's like someone that actually codes. And that's why a lot of people say you should have technical founders, right? Because they help in moving things faster, right? The non-technical founder will be the person who's not coding really, right? And then consultants, you have consultants that run startups, right? Consultants also have insights into a lot of things, right? Who is your company, right? It's like, who do you say you are? Are you clear on who it is that you are, or are you still deciding who you are? If you're deciding who you are, then it's really difficult as well, right, in your grant readiness preparation, right, to be able to tell what to do or how to approach it. What is your identity as a startup, right? What do you call yourself? Are you a startup? Are you an SME? Are you an early stage startup? Are you a middle stage startup? Are you a growth stage startup? Are you an NGO, right? Are you a social enterprise, right? How do you tag yourself? That's very important, right? Because grants are basically tailored. They know what they're looking for as a funder, right? They know where they're looking at, right? Where they're focused on. Are you in Nigeria? Are you in Ghana, right? There's so many grants that come out, and if you read through the fine print, right, they'll tell you, oh, they're only focused in Malawi, they're only focused in Nigeria, right? They're only focused on social enterprises, right? They're only focused on startups, early stage startup, growth stage startups, right? They're only focused on research firms, only focused on schools, right, institutions. So understanding your identity and how you position yourself is important. Are you a he? Are you a she? Right? Whatever you identify as is very, very important because even grants ask this, right? Are you black? Are you white? Are you middle? What race is it that you identify as, really? That's very important. What industry do you belong to? If you remember earlier, I defined who I am, basically, right? Based on the industry Age Medical aligns with, right? And why is that, right? You also need to understand that so that you know where you're telling, what grants you're applying for, right? If you're only limiting yourself to being a health tech solution, right? Then when a climate solution comes up, like the Infuse project coming up this year, right? What's it that you want to do? You can't apply because you're a health tech solution. It says, oh, maybe climate focused, right? Climate resilience, right? How do you apply for that if you're only a health tech funder? We are health tech, we're climate, so we're definitely applying for this year's Infuse, right? So are you logistics, right? Are you a fintech, right? Do you use AI? Do you use machine learning? Understanding your industry is very, very important. So also know what it is that you want to do, right? And just to use an example, right? There are two organizations. So there's I'm sure how many of us have a Help Mom? There's Help Mom, there's MDoc, right? These are examples of organizations who are well funded, like with grants, and we might not all know the call because they're not, and it's not written somewhere how much they've raised, but they are well funded organizations, right? Who understand who it is they are, right? Who understand who they're solving this for. So I give you an example. The CEO of Help Mom is a medical doctor, right? The CEO of MDoc is a medical doctor and a consultant, right? This is back to who you are as a person, right? So as a consultant, right, there are inroads you already understand, there are inroads you know about already, there are secrets you know about. As a medical doctor, there are secrets you know about as well, right? But over time, right, they understand who it is they are, right? And they position their companies with specific identities to be able to fit specific theses, right, for grants. Who are you solving this for? Who are you solving this for, right? Who's your customer? A clear subset, right? Healthcare market is pretty big, right? I'm sure we know by setting up your startup, you're saying, oh, I'm solving for the whole of Nigeria. Makes no sense. Nobody pays attention to you, right? You need a clear subset, right? If you say, oh, vulnerable people, what subset of vulnerable people are you selling for? They're vulnerable. I give an example of vulnerable people. Who can give an example of the vulnerable? When you say, oh, your solution solves for vulnerable members of the population. Anybody? Have we heard of that before?
The poor.
Yeah, the elderly, children, refugees, displaced people. Thank you.
Fantastic. Someone said the poor. Correct. Someone said displaced people. Someone said elderly. Someone said children. Right? We've left out pregnant women. Right? You can't solve for all those people at the same time. Right? So you need to be clear on the exact subset, right, you're solving for, right, to be able to apply for grants because they're specific. They don't want to see that you're all over the place, right? And another maybe easy way to be able to tell this for yourself if you're confused is look at your competitors. Who do you think your competitors are, right? What are they solving for? Who are they solving for? What have they done? That's an easy way to be able to go about identifying what is that and who it is that you are. Next slide, please. So what do you say you are, right? What do you do? What do people say you do? I know those are two different things. So I'll give you an example, right? I always crack this joke about some company. There's a company I know that says, oh, this is what we do, right? And every time you meet a representative of that company, right, they say the exact same thing. Like, it's almost robotic, right? This is what we do, this is what we do, this is what we do. But then when you ask other people what they do, people like, they don't understand what they do, all right? So you can see that there's a disparity there, right? Can you explain what you do to a 3-year-old in simple terms, right? If it was me, I would say I save lives. That's what I would say, right? To a 3-year-old, I'm helping people save lives. I mean, for me, I think it's easier because everybody knows 911, at least outside Nigeria, all right? So I'd hope my 3-year-old is an American or a British 3-year-old, so it makes it easier, right? The 3-year-old in Nigeria might be a bit confused, but if I say I'm saving lives, like my startup saves lives, right? I mean, if you have an emergency, I'm saving lives, basically, right? And you might not have to get it immediately. I recently watched a conversation or a pitch I had in 2022, and it was similar, but even clarity has come to me over time, right? So you don't have to rush to be clear on what it is you do. Who are your funders? Like, who's giving you money, right? Ronald has said he's not going to give you money directly, right? But he has people that can help out, right? Bertrand has said he will give you money, right, if you qualify, right? But there are 4 or 5 stages, right? So who is giving you money? Your friends and family, definitely, right? Friends and family can give you money that is not refundable, right? So you tell your mom and dad, borrow me money, right? You don't intend to pay them back because I can't wait to pay you back. You don't intend to pay them back, right? And you really don't have to be accountable for that money either, right? But those are not what people are talking about today. Like, it's not a grant, right? It's just I don't know what we'll call it, right? The gift. Thank you very much, right? It's a gift when they're giving you money, right? Members of the public, if you're commercial and you're selling a product, right, that already works, right? The members of the public will give you their money, right? Which I guess is really validation of the fact that you have something that works, right? Are people willing to pay for it, right? NGOs, VCs, governments. If government is paying you for your solution, then, I mean, I guess you can call that success, right? Zipline, an example of an organization that governments are paying, right, to deliver their solution, right? And they've been paying them for a while. They're strictly into every government's budget. They're a budget item, they're a budget line, right, for all the governments that they work with, right? How will you make money, right? Do you understand how you're making money as an organization, right? And like you said, grants can also help you until you decide how you want to make money. For us, we decided to focus on making money first before applying for grants. Why? Because we didn't want to get caught in the cycle of, oh, we're a grant funding company, we're a grant funding company. Okay, how do you scale from here, right? I'm of the school of thought that if you can generate money before you collect grants, then you're not relying solely on the grants. Because what happens when the grant finishes? Right? What happens when the cycle is done? Right? What happens when your pilot is done? Can you continue, or does the product that you put out, does it die? Right? And I'll give you an example as we go on. So, like I mentioned, who's receiving the funding? We've spoken about that. But what is your vision? Is it clear? Right? Can you explain it? For us, is to be the operating system for emergency response in Africa. Simple and short, right? And to be operating system, there's so many things that have to go into being an operating system. And if you want to explain it, all of us have operating systems on our phones, right? So imagine me saying I want to be Lion OS on an iPhone, right? You can imagine how powerful that is, right? Or I want to be the OS on a MacBook, right? Or I want to become Windows, right? That's exactly what our vision is. So how big is your vision and what is it that you have? What is your mission? Breaking out your vision into now, right? What is it that you want to do right now to be able to achieve your vision? Next slide. Why are you here? Right? Finding your why. It's like the Zen moments, right? Why are you here? Like, why are you even interested in grants? Like, why do you need it? Like, why do you care for it? Is it because it's free money? And some of the people on the call will be like, oh, yes, I don't have to pay the money, right? I don't have to do anything. So that's why I care about it. Next slide. So why are you here? Why are you interested? Are you interested just for the glam, for the paps, paparazzi? They're taking a picture of you, they're putting you on Google, on LinkedIn. You get to write a really nice post, like thank you to Healthcare Alliance, Health Coalition Finance for the money that you gave me. I appreciate it, right? I'm going to use this to do, LinkedIn is the sweetest place, right, to be gassed up, right? As a founder, as an organization, right? Why do you care? Are you mission driven? Are you impact driven? Or is it just a side project, right? Like, why does the grant matter to you? Why are you on this call today, really? Are you on the call because, like someone said, I've gotten a grant before, right? I want to get more grants, right? Why do these grants exist, right? Like the two speakers have said, is to test ideas without revenue pressure, right? To build before monetization is clear, to show the way, to show a possibility in a venture, right? To de-risk the innovation, right? To prevent you from the solution from dying before it actually starts. Next slide, please. So you've heard the who, you've heard the why, right? So what will you do? Like, what will you do? So you get this money, right? What do you have to do to get this grant? And what will you do when you eventually get the grant, right? Next slide. What does it take to get a grant, right? What are the things you have to do? It takes time. It takes discipline. It takes a lot of dedication. It takes resilience. Someone says she's written a grant, she's won one. She's written a couple of others, and she hasn't gotten them. You can't be defeated every time you write a grant and you don't get it, right? Try again. That's the whole idea of entrepreneurship, and that's the whole idea behind the grant, right? Some people, I have friends who have written grants 3-4 times and they get it on the 5th try. I write grants all the time, right? And it's the same exact process. What's your frame of mind? Are you a serious person? I'm a serious person, right? Are you a delusional person, or are you in touch with reality, right? When you're looking for grants, or when you're planning to execute your grant, what is the grant designed around, right? Grants are used for so many things. Someone mentioned research, right? Post-COVID, right? There's innovation, there's access, right? There's short-term pilots, and there's system strengthening, right? Which is infrastructure. We see ourselves at Ameco as an infrastructure solution, as an access solution, as an innovation solution, right? Research solution. What does your health tech or startup need, right? Oh, there's this grant. What do you need? What are you asking of the funders? Do you need distribution? Are you trying to work on operations? There are so many grants that don't do anything with operations. They're not interested in operations. The grants we won recently was only interested in products, like only technology products. What are your revenue models? What do you plan to do when you get it? Are you planning to impress the babe, next babe that you've been talking to? Like you've been broke, nothing in your pocket, right? And then one grant enters. And then now they're seeing you at night having dinner, and you call it investment dinners, right? Why? Because you're not a big boy, right? Are you not going to be wearing your bone straight hair, right, after you got in the grant? What type of grant is it? Is it restricted? Is it unrestricted? There are grants that you have, right, that are restricted to particular things. I see some of you laughing because you are in that category of people, right? And unrestricted funding. Yes, some people prefer unrestricted. Why? Because unrestricted funding, you can do whatever it is you want. Restricted, right, is restricted to particular things you can and cannot do. Recently got a restricted funding and we're confused. It's like, what was this? Like, this is not what we're used to, right? But you have to adapt, especially if you're serious, right? What would this grant help you achieve? Your goals, your objectives. All right, next slide, please. What is your plan for now? So you've gotten the grant. What's your plan for the future, right? And many startups fail to move beyond the pilot phase because they can't demonstrate replication at country level, at the local government level. They can't see beyond their nose, basically, right? If you're looking at the grant is not the end. When you get a grant today, that's the actual beginning of work, right? That's when it actually starts, right? What's your approach? Are you looking for a national level alignment like zipline, right? Or are you looking for local government endorsement? What are your partnership readiness plans? Can your solution integrate? So we said earlier that grants help you integrate into public sectors, into health systems, into supply chains. Zipline basically integrating easily into supply chain of Nigeria, right? There are global organizations that have brought their solution to Africa, scalable, repeatable, right? What is your startup grounded in? Fluff? When you look underneath the top, right? What is it that's going on? And I say that to a lot of, forgive me when I say that, but I say that to a lot of health tech founders. Like, oh, we're saving lives, we're doing this. And with no, I'm not saying anything about your startup, but we hear a lot of telemedicine startups, right? It's like, oh, we're doing telemedicine this, telemedicine that, right? How many people are doing telemedicine, right? How many people are actually solving problems in Nigeria? How many people are actually solving pain points? And I say it all the time, using the example of a telemedicine startup. If I FaceTime somebody and I provide consultation as a doctor, that's telemedicine. So if you understand the definition of telemedicine, taking a phone call, chatting on WhatsApp, all of that is part of telemedicine. So what are we really solving when we say we're doing telemedicine? Do you understand? So is there fluff or is there a body of evidence, which is what Stephanie mentioned or alluded to earlier, right? That's some organizations that will go through different calls and not take anybody. Why? Because there's no research back. Your work is not research back. We are medical, we're emergency care, right? And we're writing research, right? So that when people see the solution, when we demonstrate technology, you know that it actually works, right? There's research backing it, right? So some of us might have to get research, right, to be able to win grants. So finding grants, where do you find grants? Is the question. Someone asked earlier, is like, how do you network? Where do you find grants? How do you log your grants? How do you track your grants? Next slide, please. So finding grants, where do you think you can find grants? Anybody? Where do you think you can find grants?
Online, networking, some mutual groups, Telegram, WhatsApp groups, LinkedIn.
Yeah, fantastic. LinkedIn, thank you so much. LinkedIn, sometimes Instagram, you're following the right people. LinkedIn, for example, is a very good place. You can train algorithms nowadays, right? Every morning I wake up today, I see 30 grants every morning, minimum, right? Because actually in my algorithm, I don't see people aspiring to perspire on LinkedIn. I only see grants, right? On my LinkedIn, right? If you follow me on Instagram, you only go to see emergency cases. And people say I spread bad news with my Instagram because that's what I post, right? And that's what I see, right? So Google Alert, you can actually set your Google Alert so that you can actually get grants. My Google Alert is default grants, healthcare grants, climate grants, literally, right? Then how do you log grants? Structured ways to log grants. I don't know if we have time. I actually put my Excel sheets in there on to show you how I actually log grants. Understanding, what is the grant? What category is the grant? Do you have time?
No, they can
No,
can
okay.
also make it available to them after the session if you want to.
Okay. All right. So she said we can make it available. I'll think about that. I'm not sure I want to make it available, right? Everybody's gonna know how to work. So the idea really is that you set up an Excel sheet, right? And you look for grants and you plug them in, the link, right? And that's what I do. I find the grant, I read through the grant. If I think it's something that applies to us based on the sector, right? I copy, paste it on my Excel sheet, right? So I'll take a screenshot and I'll share so that you can actually look at what it looks like. It's just a table of maybe 7 to 8 columns, right? So the date, I got the date, today's date, or the deadline date, which is the most important thing. That's the most important thing with any grant. When is the deadline? Because you have to time yourself as you see, right? So the deadline, type of grant, how much it is. Is it a grant? Is it an accelerator? Is it a fellowship, right? Is it research, right? How much are they offering, right? Also helps time to how much you want to raise, right? What are they focused on, right? I put the grant in there. I put the form. So the website is different from the actual form you have to fill, and the form is different from the documentation you have to put. I don't fill forms direct, right? I fill it on a live document, right? Which you see on the fourth line, a live document, and then copy and paste into my form. It ensures that you can always go back after you submitted to see what you've written. And when we were writing the grant for CC of DPI recently, it was long, right? We submitted in May, and the program started in like August. So May, June, July, August. And in between, questions will come back. I'll create another document for that, right? And add it under that as grants, maybe A, B, right? Or you've passed this stage, you've passed this stage. Then you have checklists, right? You used to have checklists. And then calendars. You need to set reminders on, we all have Google calendars if you use Google, so that you set it for 1 to 2 days before the grant actually closes. Most times you forget the time. So if a grant closes on the 18th of May, my reminder is set to 16th, right? That is closing at 16th with the exact same time it closes, right? Time is also very important. As you see, time zones are important. If you have anything that says Pacific time, it is 8 hours behind Nigeria, for instance. So you have to know that. You also have to know that ahead of time, right? But then one important thing, which somebody asked as well, is that your resource compilation for your grant. So who, right? Who are you speaking to? The relationships, the connections, research, right? Who is giving the grants? Who are the people giving? Are they in Lagos? You go on LinkedIn, can you find them? Like for us at Aid Medical, right? We do emergency care, right? And you would think that all we do is respond to people that have broken their heads. No, for us, emergency care is divided into 4, right? And an expression of what you see in emergency care, if I asked anybody, it's like, oh, what do I do? Who can give an example of an expression of what you see and you say, oh, this is what I do? Anybody? If I say, oh, my company provides emergency care or the operating system for emergency care, what would you think of? Anybody? Anybody on the call? What will come to your mind?
Accident victims,
Yes.
emergency labor cases for pregnant women, maybe on flight or maybe on transit. What else?
Thank you very much.
School accidents. School accidents.
School accident, fantastic. But I have in the chat, people are saying ambulance, 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 right? So accidents, right, but also ambulances. So the expression of what you see as what we do is ambulances, right? So if you go to events in and across Lagos, you'd have seen our ambulances. They are purple and white. You can't miss them. They have names on the back, right? Interesting names. You have Inspector, you have Odogu, you have Small, Big Mama, you have Baby Girl, Baby Boy, right? And that's an expression of what we do, right? We have events in and around. So we have people who have interacted with our product, right? We have investors personally that have actually used our product because they had parents that, were not able to receive care. You had people that had, maybe collapsed, and they had to reach out to us and had engaged with our solution, right? So that is also important, right? Evidence for us, right? And this, if I look at my other startup, right? This is the one outside Ameco. So prior to this, like an interaction, right, with a customer, right? Literally, an interaction with the customer led to the sale of my last startup, right? One customer loved it so much and went viral. I'm not on Twitter, but went viral amongst people that friends and family, right? And it led to the commission that eventually sold the company, right? But also, like, we've had people actually recommend us, right, for grants, right? That we have actually won, right? So we had somebody who interacted with us and recommended us actually to, like, the If Social Impact award grant that we wrote and eventually won, right? So that's an example but apart from that, also building your network connections, right? Generally, if you want to ask your parents for something, you don't go on day you want to ask them for something, right? You talk to them, you check in on your mom, how are you doing, right? Hope you're well, right? All of that also adds to their chances of saying yes, right? So building connections, right? Being familiar with the ecosystem, right? Going out to events, right? Connecting with people also helps, right, in the process. I was going to say, can you go back 1 second? Yes, also, you can't, we're in the age of AI, right? So AI tools are very important also, right? To help you maybe sometimes also put your thought process together, right? I didn't say you should tell AI to write your grant for you, right? But like putting your thoughts together, bouncing ideas, right? Also very important, right? In what it is that you're doing. Also, value exchange. Not everything directly is money, right? Also connecting with people, right? Solving things for people, going to the right places, right? Events, ecosystem events, also helps your chances, right? Next slide, please. Thank you. Time management. I mentioned this earlier, deadlines, right? I have procrastinated a lot, right? And missed a lot of windows. In fact, there was a grant that we already got in. So recently, it was MTN. MTN had an accelerator recently. They gave out, I think it was 5 million and some other perks, right? We submitted literally on the last day, the first time, and got into stage 2, right? Stage 2 was the final one. And there was no way on earth we're missing that grant. Very, very easy grant. First time, they had a glitch on the last day because a lot of people were submitting, right? But we got in. The next time, it happened again, but because I procrastinated, right? Because I procrastinated, I missed that grant. It's still paying me today. It still hurts me till today, right? I called everybody because, in addition, MTN is also one of our clients, right? So we actually provide emergency response to MTN people. So I was thinking, this one that I submitted late, let me go and find somebody in MTN that have saved their life, right? To see if they can help me. It didn't work, right? MTN is a very disciplined company, right? So procrastination, right? Discipline helps, right? It's one thing to start, another thing to finish. You will start grants, right? And they are long grants. Like if you wrote the grants that we wrote for the DPI program, you know that they are long grants. They were like 1 million questions, right? So you pace yourself. You start early, right? So that you can finish on time and have the opportunity to review. You need to review, you need to ask people, right? I also had colleagues. So before Medical became what it is today, so I had a friend who I used to always send my grant to, or help me research, help me look through this. Is it okay? Right? Does it make sense? Right? Increasing your chances, the more the merrier. The more grants you apply to, the higher your chances of getting in. Right? The more times you repeat even the same grant, the higher your chances of getting it. Right? winning a grant is where the work actually starts, right? Attitude as well is everything. Devotion to your craft, devotion to the work that you do is important. It's not a time where you want to lose your head, right? Grant money is not your money to play around with. It's not your friends and family money. It's not a gift, right? But then most importantly, delivery is everything, right? Also, if for instance, a grant is, if the grant is the first time in the first quarter of the grant, also believe that, oh, if people are giving you the opportunity to win this grant for the first time and are giving you money for the first time, there's a possibility that, oh, the grant process, like the administration behind the grant, is not refined. There are grants that have been running for the past 50 years, right? You expect a lot you'll expect a lot from it, or they've refined their craft. If you have donors, if you have funders that are doing something for the first time and they've called you, they selected you to join things. We have so many startups, so many grant funders in Nigeria that are doing it for the first time, right? Give everybody grace, right? The fact that they selected you, right, doesn't mean you should have an attitude, right? Attitude is very, very important. Okay, can you go back? Thank you. Sorry, we're trying to round up. Attitude is very, very important, right? The way you also behave matters, right? Like I mentioned as well, give yourself grace. If you don't get it, if you get it, fantastic, right? But give yourself grace. Give the organizers grace, right, as well. Don't act like a spoiled brat because someone says they're giving you money, right? They worked hard for it. They also have people they report to, right? And your attitude as well also gives you the opportunity to open doors for yourself, right? If you do well with a funder, there's a chance that we recommend you to have there's a company, right, currently that I know, they've gotten grants every year from Gates Foundation, every year, right? Literally, right? They've been doing great. They've been coming back, getting more every time they ask. And sometimes they actually have to write to Gates, and then Gates say, okay, we can apportion money for this, and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, and next, thank you, Bertrand. Anatomy of a strong grant application, right? So the problem, be surgical for us, right? It was an emergency response failure generally, but focused on pregnant women, right? So when we first got the grants for GPI, right, we wanted to build in Lagos because I had a nice solution for Lagos, solving emergency problem with leveraging technology and DPI in Lagos. And DPI, for those who don't know, is digital public infrastructure, right? Read about it. So digital rails, right, that systems use, governments use, right, to solve problems, right? NIM is an example of digital public infrastructure, right? So solving problems like in Lagos, but now, thanks to the CCO and DPI team, we now officially have solutions for Gombe. So DPI required a functioning MVP, not a concept. At the time we got the grant, we had concepts, right? But the whole point of the grant was to build with you a solution that you can take to marginal people, to pregnant women for us, right? There was whole thesis, they had done research, right? And they said, if you don't have something, build something out during this period. I think we had like maybe 4 to 8 weeks, right? To build something, to get it data compliant, to get it DPI approved, right? To get it funder approved, to go to ship to market, right? And honestly, if not for the grant, all right, allowing us to be able to test, right, what's in that we had, we probably won't be in Gobe today, right? And it's just what it is because we, like I said, I and our team, right, we had a different approach to solving emergency care, right? You don't want a situation where somebody comes to you in an emergency and they're asking you to pay them before you enter the ambulance, right? Sort of like defeats the purpose, right? But if we decide to focus on the public first and foremost, right, or people who can't afford, then we won't be here today. So we went and focused on people who can afford emergency care first by providing emergency solutions for events, providing emergency solutions for hospitals, right, transporting people. Those are people that can actually pay, right, private hospitals, right, before we now came down to like less privileged people, vulnerable people, and that's what the DPI program allowed us to do. So now, because of that, we've now been able to solve and we've now been able to provide solutions for people who ordinarily were able to get it. So you have a regular phone today, not a smartphone. You can dial a USSD, right? USSD code, and an ambulance will show up. Wasn't possible before. Wasn't possible before we started the program, but now it's possible, right? Why? Because we're able to think outside what we thought we needed and also tailor what it is to the grant, right? DPI scored measurable outcomes. Impact is very important when you're grant funding, right? What is it doing, right? What are the times? Like how many people, right? What are the lives saved? How many people are poor? How many people are living under, which is something I say, if you're living under $3 a day, unfortunately for you, right, you'll be categorized as poor, right? It's just what it is, right? It's just the language of the World Bank, right? So if you think about it, $3 is like maybe 1,000, I don't know, 500. Yeah, so it's approximately 4 5. So say 4 5 times 30. What's this person earning in a month, right? And anything less than that is what they would be earning. What we consider them as poor. But that's going to World Bank. In Nigeria, it's even worse. Can I give you an example categorically where we are currently in Gombe, right? 100 naira matters to a pregnant woman. 100 naira is the reason why a pregnant woman is not going to go to the hospital to get delivered, right? 100 naira is the reason why she's not going to attend her antenatal session, right? Execution. Programs want you to execute properly, right? Evidence of execution, evidence that you have capacity, right? Multiple stage programs assess whether or not you can ship under a particular structure, right? Budget in every line is very, very important. But also, remember I mentioned earlier that your identity is important. If you understand what it is you're selling, right, then it's easy for you to budget for it. So I give you an example. In our budget, in one of the DPI program, we have product, right? Product. But if you think about it, what is my product? Like I'm not selling a fintech app, right? When we first started the conversation, we spoke to our organizers and our funders and we're like, look, my product is more than an app, right? My product is actually the person, the human being. My product is actually the ambulance, right? That forms the product I am selling. That forms the product, right, that I am innovating around, right? The actual vehicle, the actual ambulance is also what forms my product, right? So you can imagine a product, a grant that only wants you to work on products, and your product is the ambulance. How do you marry both, right? And you're meant to buy things with your maybe buy laptops or buy this, and then your own product is ambulance. I'm not going to buy an ambulance, right? So understanding who it is you are and what it is you stand for, what it is your solution is, what is your product is very important. Fit, DPI focused on maternal health across board, right? Inclusivity, right? Inclusion, right? Which is what you hear about now. MoneyPoint is one of the biggest and most inclusive solutions in Nigeria. MTN is one of the most inclusive solutions in Nigeria. I always say something, right? That one thing that connects the richest man in Nigeria with the poorest man in Nigeria today is a phone line, right? And the fact that they must both buy credit, right? We have to buy credit, and which is why MTN is one of the biggest players, right? Which is why MoneyPoint is one of the biggest players. You must buy credit, you must buy data, no matter what happens, right? So we're able to solve for inclusion, right? Via USSD, WhatsApp, IVR, right? And at the state level, right? We went to meet people where they were, right? So understanding your problem, understanding your customer is also important, right? Because if the grant says, I want you to solve for the vulnerable, right? You're going to meet them where they are. In Gombe, for instance, when we did like a community immersion session, right? Somebody in the room said, you have USSD. Why don't you have app like Uber? And we're saying, I don't understand, like, do you have Uber on your phone? And that's what we asked him, like, do you have the Uber app on your phone? And he was like, no. He said, well, most people would like Uber. It was not a representation of the actual solution. It was a representation of the people. In Gombe, you have people that don't have phones. So you want to register them and they don't have phones. You want to register them and they have outstanding balance on their phone, so they can't be registered, right? You have a 200 naira debt on your phone, right? So you can't be registered on the platform, right? So understanding who you're solving for and meeting them at that level is also important with your grant solution, right? Evidence, right? We have partnerships, right, with Lagos State Emergency Management Agency. We have partnerships with a couple of government organizations, but then also now I can probably say that we have partnerships and agreements like with the state governments, right? At primary healthcare level, secondary healthcare level, and it's something we're taking across different states. We're backed by institutional organizations. Everybody knows Techstars. Some people know Catalytic, depends on what space you're working in, right? We're backed by notable people in Nigeria as well, right? So our evidence, our portfolio of evidence is actually there, right? You have to be able to cite them properly in your presentation. We have a grant we recently wrote for, and they said, oh, give us evidence of your MOU agreements with the institutional backers, give us evidence of the government you're working with, evidence, like literally, like the song says, evidence has to fool everywhere, literally, right? In this kind of thing. Nobody goes to back with evidence. Like Stephanie mentioned earlier, you want to apply for, get money from a funder that wants to see research. You want to see published journals that this thing works. Honestly, if all investors in the world said that they want to see published evidence of the work that we do, or the work that we're doing, some of the startups will be alive today. Did you apply? No, please send it to me. Oh. Did you apply for? No, I didn't. Oh. Please send it to me, send it to me. Thank you very much. Right? So call to action, right? What does this grant unlock? I mentioned it earlier, right? What do you want to use the grant for? You have to know, right? Is it to unlock states? Is it to grow? Is it to build out a concept, right? Is it to scale, right? Go to the next level. Next slide, please. Right? You need to understand, right? So pitfalls, right? Eight Medical, like I said, and I'll ask Stephanie's question. It's like, oh, why did you fund us? Eight Medical was funded, right? Stephanie's right here, right? She can tell us why we were funded, right? I don't know why we're funded. I don't know how we're funded, right? We applied for the grants, right? I think we did pretty well, which is why I'm standing here today, right? But I'd like Stephanie to tell us why we were funded and to tell you why we were funded, especially.
All right.
Right, so big problem solving. I mentioned earlier, you need to know what your problem statement is. You need to know what your vision is. You need to know who you're solving for. You always get rejected if you generalize. For us, we're solving for pregnant women, right? Pregnant women who fall under the vulnerable category, who fall under, right, a subset of Nigerians, right? Who fall under citizens of Nigeria, right? But guess what? They're pregnant women in the 36 states of Nigeria, right? So we're solving for pregnant women, right, in Gombe, right, who live under, most likely live under $3 a day, right? When you have polished decks, right, you built your deck, right, you pitched, right, you don't have money yet, you don't have traction yet, you don't have anything yet, be honest about what you have, right? Grants love honesty, and sometimes you see some solutions that you're wondering, how do you get backed, right? It's because you just told the story as it is. No fluff, no line, no padding numbers, right? Oh, I just started 2 days ago, right? And I only have 10 users, right? Oh, I just started 2 days ago, I'm pre-revenue, right? There are grants that fund pre-revenue. Like the speakers mentioned earlier, there are grants that take you, right, up until you're able to generate revenue and then grow, right? Deploy solutions, yes, get more attention, right? But you still have grants that are able to help you prove your concept, right? Okay, I guess we'll take questions later, right? If you say we aim to save lives, no, sorry, I'm still there. Yeah, every startup says this, right? Every health tech startup today is saving lives, and that's the truth, right? If you're a hospital, you're saving lives. Traditional institutions. If you're a health tech founder, you're saving lives. Like our chief here said, right? You're connecting people through telemedicine and are using EMRs, right? There are a lot of EMRs in Lagos who are recording information and helping people see the information, right? Well, how specific are you, right, into what it is you're doing, right? Your objectives, whatever it is you're saying, has to be smart, like what's that you're looking to achieve, right? And also, just saying that you don't have any partners as well, right? You're doing your work, there's no validation, there's no revenue, you don't have partners, you don't have clients. Like, how do you expect somebody to fund you, right? You need able to say, even if you sold to somebody down the street, you need to say, oh, I have this user. If you sold to an institution, private, no matter how small, you need to mention it, right? Back in the day, a lot of people would say, oh, being a solo founder in an organization, you can't get funded, right? You need to have a co-founder. Things are changing a bit, right? And I'm one of those solo founders that has a very strong head, as you can see, right? And the idea is that you keep pushing at it, right? I give an example. An example is that I give an example of certain. There's some partners that we've gotten just by me having a strong head. There's some rooms that we've been into that I wasn't really invited in, right? Why? And I can use those. Partners now as evidence of the work that we've done, right? And every partner you get helps you get to the next level, right? You get a private partner today, helps you get to the next level. If you get a small local government today, it helps you get to the state government, because you can tell the state government that, look, we're doing it in this local government, right? And we can scale it on the state level, right? Then also, right, to be able to elucidate and properly itemize what it is they're looking to achieve is very, very important, right? Oh, what milestones am I going to have, right? What am I going to achieve? This grant, I know what it is, right? This is where I'm going. In 6 months, this is where I'm going to be, right? You have to have a plan ahead of what it is you want to do, right? Every grant, or almost every grant, asks for milestones. Last slide, please. So you need to know what it is that you're looking to achieve. Last slide. With the grants, you need to know where it is you're going, right? Last slide. Yes. So your grant readiness checklist. So structure your narrative properly, right? Based on whatever the grant is. Problem, solution, impact, execution, right? Your budget, if they ask for a budget, not all grants ask for budget, right? And every section should connect. It should not be distorted, like, oh, you're going from A to Z. Like, it should flow. It should be like a proper story, right? That can connect. That will connect one to the other, right? Use the grants, understand what the grant is for, right? Use it, equity-free grants are for you to help you gather information, right, for the next one, right? You might get a small grant today. I give an example. We won a grant, I didn't even mention that. We won a grant that was, $2,000. We won a grant that was $5,000, right? We won a grant that was $10,000, right? The small one, someone will think, oh, I'm not applying. There's a particular startup that I know, that I'm very close to. Every time I say, oh, apply for this grant, you know what they ask me? They say, oh, how much is it? And I was like, it's 5,000. Please. I don't waste my time. I don't waste my time on those type of grants. Why? Because they've been funded before, right? They're well funded. If you're not, beggars are not choosers for me, right? I apply for everything. There's one grant that is open on my laptop now. And for those who don't know, I think Bet Nigeria Foundation has a grant that's open. It's 3 million naira. I'm going to apply, right? Because beggars are not choosers, right? The more things you learn more things by applying. You learn new tactics. You learn new ways of applying. You learn new tips, new questions to help you define who it is that you are. To be honest, 30 million naira, if I guess today, it's going to finish in the next maybe 10 minutes, right? But it is money that I can use to help me tell my story. I still apply so you can get it. I'll think about it, right? But I'm not what it was, but I don't choose. I apply for everything, right? If you check my sheet, anything. So if you have any grants, please send to me, right? I apply, right? Also, you need to read the funder's brief. Understand, research the funder's priorities, right? They give me a grant, their FAQs, their grant questions. You need to read. A lot of people don't read. you just see the grant and you're just going to apply, right? It's like, $100,000, you're just going to apply. For someone to give you $100,000, right, it's not beans. You have to meet certain criteria. For someone to give you $1 million, you have to read, understand, right? They're going to take your blood, right? They're giving you $1,000 or 500,000 naira, they might not really disturb you, right? But they're giving $1 million, the questions they need to ask. You need to understand, how can I align myself to this? Like, if you don't know, right, subscribe. They're free AI tools, right? Subscribe for one or use the free version, right? Ask it, oh, how do I align with this grant? It will tell you, like, oh, that makes sense. I didn't think of that before. I give you an example. One of our biggest investors today, now, when we started, right, I used to say, well, health tech founder, this and that. But after the investor DM'd me on LinkedIn and said, oh, have you ever thought that you were a climate-focused fund? That's like climate. It's like, but if I'm thinking this way, is it attached to money? And the answer is yes. I say yes, then don't worry. I'm a climate-focused fund. But in reality, right, if you look at it, right, what happens when there's climate disruption? When there's an earthquake today, right? Who is the first person you're going to call? It's not emergency responders. Yes, but I never thought about it that way, right? That's climate resilience. So we will fall under climate resilience, not necessarily, I'm saving you power, or I'm saving energy, or I'm doing, what's that thing they count? There's one, carbon credits. I'm not counting carbon credits, right? I'm just doing climate resilience. And that's how we became a climate-focused startup. So I applied for any climate resilience grant, right? Do we use a lot of GPS, blah, blah, blah? I realized that I can apply for spatial recognition, because if I have to find you, I have to use GPS. GPS is global positioning system, for those who don't know, but I'm assuming everybody knows. But it's the bane of what we do: distribution, redistribution, right? So aligning what it is you're doing with the thesis, but then build your evidence first. Everything that you do applies. Everything you've done in your life also applies. You can take in experience from your past, from your personal past. They say, oh, have you done a business before? Think about it. Have you sold anything to anybody, right? Have you sold groundnut on the side of the road? Did you sell bread? Do you sell dundun, right? That's a business, right? Can you talk about how you sold dodo, right, to people in your neighborhood, right? In a way that can help your grant? Yes, you can. That's the truth, right? And I've done it too, and it helps, right? But yes, make sure you build your evidence, and I wish you all the best. Thank you very much for having me. Have a great one. If you have any questions, I'm available to answer.
All right, thank you very much, Nico. Thank you. We're going to bring you back up to answer a couple of questions. But let me address quickly some of the question that Ibukun had asked, and just highlight a few things as well. So what we've listened to right now is mostly from a startup perspective, and basically having him share from his own experience in applying and how he goes about it, right? Again, this is a two-part series, right? So we're also going to have another session where we would have researchers also come on board to also work with us and provide us step-by-step guide as well as to how to respond to a proposal. If you're a startup in the room and others in the room, and you feel you've learned something critical from what Ibukun has shared today, please, you can do a clap emoji. Let's appreciate him for what he shared. All right, now going straight to his question regarding how he was selected. How were you selected? What were the criteria that we looked out for? All right. I will speak on that generally. There are a couple of startups that applied for that opportunity. And just like he had said previously, it's important that you understand what your funder is interested in, that you read the call for application well enough, and you understand the interest of your funders. For that opportunity, one of the things, and I'll highlight them as things that you should also think about when you're setting up your organization, when you're looking into your team, and then when you're looking to apply for an opportunity. One will be their focus area. For that opportunity, we're particularly interested in improving health outcomes for pregnant women. And needless to say, he's talked about the solution and how it works at the last mile. And so we saw it as a viable solution for achieving that goal. Secondly, we looked at innovation. The focus was to leverage artificial intelligence and USSD at the last mile. Is it feasible? We considered feasibility, how innovative it is, the potential for impact. 3, we looked at the team, and I'll talk about that quickly, especially for startup founders. A lot of the time, just like you had mentioned, you could be a medical professional working in the field, and because of that, it becomes quite obvious to you what the challenges are. However, it's important that, beyond being a medical doctor, there's someone with a business-minded, there's a business-minded person, or someone with a business background on your team. That's 2. And when we talk about your team, at that point, we're thinking about the leadership team that you have. 3, we want to see a tech expert on your team, right? So beyond yourself, who's the founder, we want to know what background you have and how it relates to the opportunity. We want to see if there's someone who's focused on business, who's going to do the marketing, who's going to lead that component of the work. 3, we're thinking technically, as relates to the technology, who leads that aspect and what qualifications do they have? 4, and this has become recently important, and this is not to say it's important across all of the opportunities for which we fund, but it's something to also think about. We're continuously seeing funders interested in funding women and closing the gap as it relates to access to funding for women. And so depending on who the primary funder might be, the funder might be interested in seeing that there is a woman representation on the leadership of that organization, and that also has scores its point on the rubrics. In addition to that, we might be interested in seeing the percentage of the staff that are actually female. Some of these things may not come outright when you submit your application or when we're putting out the call for application, but it's something to also take seriously. We want to understand how well you take some of those seriously. For some applications, we might also be interested in the policies that the company has. Does it align with ours, and how have they showcased it? And in some instances, this is one of such that might be important. Again, for some opportunities, they might be interested in giving more opportunities to vulnerable people, persons with disabilities, etc. For those kinds of opportunities, there'll be criteria for that, and there'll be added points for those. But one of the key things that will always be critical is the potential for impact. Do you have an innovative solution? How novel it is? What potential does it have for impact? Those would be the ones that I think I can remember on the go that I'd like to highlight during this session. Yeah, and finally, sometimes we ask for evidence of impact. And so for some of these solutions, they have had some initial evidence, and we ask for those evidence. Some of them, it's as basic as an interview with a woman who actually had used the products, right? For some of them, there are blog posts with evidence of where it happened, pictures and all of that. Especially for those at the early stages where the numbers are not huge yet, right? Reference to those sorts of evidence. You have, someone from a government hospital, someone from, a government parastatal that has used your solution or has endorsed your solution. You have an article written that shows all of that. Or, you've done some basic work and someone in the community used your solution and is excited enough to give you the opportunity to record them and document their success stories. That's also something that we take seriously, and we ask for those sort of evidences when we engage. One thing I want all of us to do, I know from this session, we've heard from Ibukun's perspective, how he applies, what he looks out for. I want us to also get into another session after now, at the second stage of this event, where we look closely at opportunities and say step by step, what do we need? What's critical in this application? From your executive summary all the way to your, your introduction, your monitoring and evaluation plan, your results framework, your even your conclusion, all the way to the conclusion. We want you to take it step by step and give you some more insight as to what makes for a good application, a very strong application. And where it's possible, we might also ask one or two startups who have been successful to share with us some of their successful ones and make that a reference that you can, use for your future application. Again, that's with a caveat. I hope they're willing to share. But to the extent that they're willing, we want to make that available for you. So please do not miss out the next segment. I'm sure there will be some questions for Ibukun. So I'll give room for him to take this question.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Ibukun, for that unique. I would say that we've received our grant writing 101 class here. The next phase of this session will be like your grant writing 102 class. So we're going to be taking, I think now is a good time for us to take our good photos, and then we'll take some key takeaways, take your feedback, and then inform you of what to expect for the next. That Stephanie mentioned, this is the phase 1 in the grant writing series. We're going to have a phase 2 of it. So just would ask everyone if we can all just turn on our cameras so we can just take a group photo of light just little bit. Oh, those of us here. Those are just here. There is.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. So please just turn on your camera so we can take some photos. Next 1 minute. Still waiting for more people. Let's do that. Let's say cheese. Cheese. Say HTCA. Oh, you can say brand. Money. Yeah. All right. Let's do that fast. All right, so I was just quickly clear my screen again for us to take the remaining part of today's session, and then we have of course, close for the day. We're really pressed for time, and so I'm not sure if we'll be able to take as many questions as we have loved to, because we are really, really pressed for time. There's still opportunity to ask your question if you progress, if you indicate interest. Phase 2 is really going to be somewhat closed. It's probably going to be a very closed session so that we can go as in-depth as we want. So we would employ you to sort of fill out our feedback form, which is also the form where you can indicate your interest to be part of the phase 2. So kindly fill out the feedback form. It's on your screen now. You can scan it. The link is being dropped in the chat box. So please fill out the feedback form and help, so we can select those who can progress to the phase 2 of the session. But I do know that one thing I would say in terms of in regards to takeaway, particularly from the open session, is the importance of articulating who you are, because one of the things that will be required in a grant is your executive summary. And you need to be able to have well articulated who you are and what you are for you to be able to write that. Also, you also talked about why the grant is important to you, because you need to be able to understand why you're applying for that particular grant and be able to articulate that in response to the funders required, not just really what you're doing, but how you fit into the acts that they have asked. I know that Adam has been taking some notes in regards to key takeaways. So I would like to invite Adam to just share with us a couple of key takeaways.
So Firstly, I want to thank the speakers for providing a very impactful and very insightful session for us all, and just helping us to be able to conceptualize what grants is from the perspective of the funder and from the perspective of the applicants. So some key takeaways are the fact that many businesses miss funding not because of the fact that their model lacks potential, or because readiness was not kept at pace with ambition. And also the key blended finance model, which is the multiply health fund, which represents an innovative model for scaling healthcare businesses by bridging catalytic and commercial capital. They provide technical assistance, investor engagement, and of course catalytic capital. So one of the key things that Dr. Ibukun talked about was grants. He defined grants. He said that grants are capital for solving problems market haven't fixed yet. He also highlighted steps to grants writing or starting a company, where he talked about understanding who you are. Are you a technical founder? Are you a non-technical founder? What's your company identity? Is the startup, an SME, an NGO? How do you make your money? He also highlighted the importance of generating money on your own, so you don't get caught up in the loop or left stranded when the cycle ends. Like right now, we can see the funding landscape, particularly for NGOs, shifting, whereby you see funds being pulled out. So it's very, very nice to be able to source for your own fund or generate your own fund so you don't become funder reliant. He also highlighted why you are here, which is why you are applying, what you intend to do with the money, what's your frame of mind, what type of grants do you seek, and what is the grant design around to ensure that what you are sourcing for fits what the funder is looking for. And he also highlighted the anatomy of the strong grants, whereby he highlighted the problem, the solution, the impact, the execution, the budget, the fit, how well your solution fits, the evidence of your work, and also the call to action. Yeah. And he highlighted the grant readiness checklist, how to structure your narrative, how to use the grants to de-risk, read the funder's brief so you understand adequately what the funder is looking for and how best you fit, and also build your evidence. These are some key takeaways and feedback. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ada, for that. Before we close, I just wanted to just touch a little bit on what the second phase is going to look like. We've talked about how we are going to go more in-depth into what the grant looks like, the structure of a grant, and what the critical segments of a grant looks like, and how you have to feel that. But also, in addition to that, we are also going to be looking at some open calls that are available and how your eligibility status of your startup. We're also going to be taking it even further in that we're going to, depending on how your startup fits, we may be pairing startups together, or just you may be paired, or you could just be a standalone startup who would be providing you with some sort of support to actually write a grant and submit, which is really the whole point of all of the conversations that we've been having, is to ensure that during that time when you would be writing your grant, you have you're equipped with the necessary information, with the necessary framework to help you write and submit a grant. Right, so the goal is for you to submit your grant. And so come ready for the phase 2. Come ready for the phase 2 part of the conversation for the grant writing series. That is like really the main, where we're going to really sit down and be thorough in what we are doing. If you are yet to take the feedback, that is really your gate pass to the phase 2. Please do well to fill out the feedback form and indicate your interest to be a part of the phase 2. I know that the link has been dropped in the chat to the 2 bags. And with that, we can actually take 1 or 2 questions from the crowd. Does anyone have a question they would like to ask? 1 or 2 questions from the audience who are here, particularly for Ibukun or for Stephanie as well. If you have any question, please feel free to unmute yourself, 1 or 2 persons.
Any questions tonight? Chat.
All right. Do we have any questions in the chat box? I think there was one question.
If there's no question or no obvious question, that's fine. We can attempt to answer any other question via email or at the next session. So let's just take note of the questions.
Someone asked, how do we get notifications for grants when grants are advertised?
So we'll address that during the next session, yes?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's collect questions and then address them afterwards.
All right. In terms of closing remarks, I would like to see if Stephanie would like to give us any closing remarks for the day.
Right. Okay. It's been an exciting time with everybody here in the room, I believe, and those online. I want to use the opportunity to really appreciate, first and foremost, every speaker that's joined us here, Bertrand, Ibukun, as well as Roland. Yeah, thank you all so much for making the time to share from your knowledge with everyone who's come on the call and who's been here physically. I also want to, just quickly appreciate the team. They've done a very good work. I mean, they started off by engaging with community to understand what they needed. I think Ngozi had reached out to say, everyone says they want to learn how to gain grants. How do we do it? And a lot of thinking has gone into this, a lot of engagement. And that's why you have here the representatives from Gavi, Infuse, and an investment company, and even a startup from our program here, because we want to make sure that we're speaking directly to people and we're giving you the information that you need. So thank you all once again, and thanks to the team for the time. But more importantly, all of this is only relevant if the information is used to attract investment for your businesses, etc. I know, like Ibukun has said, he mentioned applying for everything, right? I'm sure he doesn't mean that, right? We definitely need to be strategic and ensure that you're going for what you're going to win. And that's what we really want to do in the next session. So I want to join everyone to register or fill the necessary forms and make yourself available for the next session. The next session, we focus on what it takes to win. And we want you to come into that session with an open call in mind that you want to apply for. If you're coming in without all the complete requirements for that call, we want you to take the initiative to identify someone else who might be important to collaborate with you to meet the requirements for that call. We want to ensure that everyone in the room has a strong fighting chance to win the next opportunity that they applied for. So please take it seriously. Once again, thanks everyone for your time. And thank you very much to those who have come here physically. It's the first physical event we're having in like 2 years. No, we had in like 2 years. And our community is quite used to being online, but we're going to change that very soon. And we're going to be having physical events a lot more. Sorry to those who are able to join. You can join from our other country offices and other hubs. We, implement such innovation hubs and several other hubs. So we're going to be having more physical meetings. We want peer-to-peer learning. We want strong interactions, right? And so please, our next events will likely be physical. So please be here physically. Thanks again. Thanks everyone.